putting force the vote to bed with Sam Seder. Oh, by the way, dude, I saw a clip of when someone in chat said, "Do you think Michael Brooks would have supported this?" And Brianna Joy Gray did one of the most disgusting, ego-driven things I've ever seen from her, and that's saying a lot. But yeah, I guess we'll.
All right, let's go live. We are live.
Hey everyone! Thank you for joining us. We are now being joined by the one and only Sam Seder, who's in the waiting room. I see you guys all in the comments.
I'm gonna slow it down once they bring Sam on.
I want this to be a camaraderie evening, so please keep that in mind.
Camaraderie.
I don't.
Frame
I don't at all.
All right, let's do this.
Virgil,
Hey, Sam.
Okay. What should I do it at? Normal or 1.25? Pick one of these. Let me see some answers. Normal or 1.25? Which one? Not doing 1.5. That's a little too fast for me right now. A little tired. So which one of these? I'm gonna wait till I see you. 1.25. Okay, that's the highest I'm going. So, all right. Everybody thinks okay. Normal. 1.25. Yeah. Okay. 1.25 wins. That's a good middle ground between 1.5 and 1. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Hear you. I could hear you, Virgil. I heard what you said.
What did I say?
You don't want this to be camaraderie. Hi, Brie. How are you?
I'm doing well, Sam. How have you been?
I am tired.
Fair enough.
Sam, how long have you been in that studio? For about 6-8 months now?
In this studio?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like
No.
like,
I mean, you've been sitting in that chair for the
I mean, it feels like it. It definitely feels like it. I've been here all day today. It feels
Virgil.
like.
A man who is trapped in the.
He drinks and smokes a lot on the show.
Indeed. Here, let me see if I can just. I can sort of just get a slightly different look here. You can box that out like that, right? That's
right, because it's not your show.
Right.
Yeah, you're in our zone right now, brother. I feel the least about the force vote stuff. So maybe you want to flip me and Sam, so I'm at the bottom of the screen.
I don't know how to do. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh yeah.
Jeez.
Right. So then I'm more splitting the difference.
We have technology.
Yes, Virgil's our judge.
Did Ben? Really quick, did producer Ben want to do something with this? Or run the stream?
Oh, he vapes. He doesn't
No,
smoke.
everything's going as planned, Virgil.
No, he was packing cigarettes. No,
been-
Virgil was packing cigarettes in the last episode I saw of Bad Faith. He was definitely packing cigs. He wasn't. That wasn't vape.
My favorite part is listening to you guys squabble beforehand.
We're ready to go. Virgil's gonna play moderator of sorts. But I wanna start just by asking.
Maybe
you,
it was vapes. I don't know.
Sam, the name of our show is Bad Faith. And so I want to get your sense of where the bad faith breakdown came in the midst of this entire force the vote debate. Because I will say, I first heard of it from you on your show. The very first time I heard of the idea was from you. And you were, giving it plaudits at the time. And I thought, well, if Sam Seder likes this thing and it's a Jimmy Dore idea, then it must be something I should look into more closely. So what happened?
Well, I think if I remember correctly, that's sort of how I presented it when we talked about it. And if I remember correctly, what I felt was at the time, and I remember the original video that Jimmy did about it, where he was talking like, there was a spirit of of camaraderie, I guess, on some level that he was appealing to, if I remember correctly. And at the time, I said, this sounds like a good idea to leverage the vote for something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I remember correctly, don't hold me to this, but maybe I probably should have checked that video. But I'm pretty sure I said at the time, I'm not sure that Medicare for All vote is the best idea. You might want something like committees or something like that. But the idea of leveraging the vote, I thought was a good one.
Yeah, that's a key thing to remember. He wasn't for forcing the vote on Medicare for All. He was for getting concessions in general with the vote for Pelosi for Speaker.
I think at the time, I may have said on the video or not, my feeling was like, I'm going to look into it. I'm going to ask around a little bit if this is, people think this is a good idea, and if they're looking for something else. And after that, if I'm pretty sure I have the sequence correct, I did ask a couple of people I know who are sort of not necessarily directly involved in that, but sort of peripherally involved and might have known about that. And I heard they were going for other stuff. I think ultimately that turned out to be the PAYGO thing. And I don't think after that I said anything about it, because I still felt like it's not a bad idea to, inject this notion of leveraging the vote. And
So
I think
sorry, go ahead.
And then I think it wasn't until I saw Jimmy turn it into, the next thing I saw about it was Jammie doing a video saying that AOC was the thing that was the person that was standing between us and Medicare for all. She was a sellout. She was a fraud. And I realized, like, oh.
Okay, so Sam, just to
I was an idiot.
clarify, I want to clarify. You said you talked to some people who were peripherally related, who said that they didn't think that force the vote was a good idea.
Well, no, it wasn't they didn't think that force the vote was a good idea. It was more like I was checking around to see if there's other things that are being leveraged. And there was, and the answer I got was yes. And the, you know, and I think I had conversations with people who were like, you know, what happens after let's presume for a moment that, and one of the things, you know, I had trouble with subsequent to it was just sort of like, what are the mechanics of this? Like, exactly, like, what is the, what follows from the force the vote? And at that point I decided, okay, not a great idea, but I'm not going to, I'm a very much a, you know, let 1,000 flowers bloom type of guy.
Are you able to tell us any more about who it was you were talking to?
No, but it's not earth shattering. It's, you know, it's very peripheral people. And, you know, we all have our sources. Some are on the record, some are off. And
Sam's in a group DM with Bernie Sanders.
But I can tell you this, I will say this, just for the sake of your audience, it was not AOC and it was not anyone at MSNBC. So there's the two sort of like,
True.
Because Sam, there are. I mean, I don't know whether to credit this or not. But I read some of the comments on YouTube, on Facebook, and some people were saying that on Twitter rather, that there was some. They had sources that suggested that there were some folks in Congress or on their staffs that wanted to kill the force the vote movement, and I just wasn't sure if it was someone affiliated with a congressperson or not. No. Okay, so the question.
We have to kill the force the vote movement. Did you guys see that in Washington? They had a whole 10 people. We got to kill the movement. Oh, God. Imagine thinking that. Imagine being Breonna Joy Gray and thinking that, dude. You have this big movement that you think is huge, and you get 5 people to march on Washington from across the entire country. When, like, if anybody's in organizing groups, you can probably get that sizable group, like 15 people, 20 people in a day, if you're talking about like local politics. But their egos are so big.
Step 2, Jesus. I think. I'm glad you brought that up. Because I think the point at which it became kind of bad faith from my perspective was largely around folks who are making this argument that we don't know what step 2 is, right? And to me, it's obvious. You withhold the vote in exchange for any number of concessions, which it's always been, my argument has always been, it's a floor vote on Medicare for all, because I think that's what draws the greatest amount of spectacle. And it's an issue that is number one in the minds of Americans right now, as 15 million people have just lost their employer-based healthcare in the middle of this crisis. We all know how exigent the issue is. But in addition to that, as soon as David Sirota put out his excellent article about what all the other asks could be, including getting rid of Richie Neal, including getting rid of PAYGO in its entirety, I said yes. And I included all of those asks and linked to Sirota's article in the article that I wrote very early in all of this, I think in mid-December. And so it was always about a lot of asks, including the ones that you just said were going to be the priority instead of Medicare for all. So if the issue is step 2, then that would be the same if you're asking for these narrow PAYGO exemptions that they got, and it would be the same as we were asking for more, right? So it seemed to me that the what is step 2, which is what AOC said to Justin Jackson, right, in that Twitter thread. That's where the tone shifted from my perspective. When AOC weighed in that Twitter thread and offered up a bunch of responses that didn't seem especially credible. What is step 2? We just have to fight for a $15 minimum wage. That's priority. That's when the tone shifted away from the Progressive Caucus more broadly, and Mark Pocan specifically, to why is it that we're kind of being fed what feels like a misdirection? And is this really a crisis, a tactical disagreement, or is this a crisis of political will, or something else going on here, or deals being made that don't necessarily inure to the benefit of the voting public?
Well, let me just address those in order. I mean, one, I take exception with the 2 premises that you start off with. One, that a vote of 300 approximately, you know, let's assume the 118 who have co-sponsored the bill vote for it in the House. Maybe you get 1 or 2 other people. I don't know. Maybe, but let's call it 125. You will then have approximately 320 people voting against it. Now, your sense is that this is the most prominent issue amongst people, I guess, presumably because we're in a pandemic. I don't know that it's any less pressing because we're in a pandemic. I think if we have Medicare for all, it certainly would have made things a little bit easier, but I don't know that would have had a material difference. But we just tested the premise of whether and I have no doubt, I've seen all the polling, the people support Medicare for all. Mm-hmm. How strong that support is. If in the nature, let's say the vote happened this week, they lose 325 to 125. Your argument is that this is going to make people rise up because of that. And I just don't see any evidence of it. We know that Bernie represented Medicare for all
Good
in the
morning,
Democratic
Geoff.
primary. That was not sufficient for him to beat Joe Biden. We know that 3 years ago, there was a vote that was shut down in the Senate. I don't know if
True.
people remember that, but that, I think, so I'm not convinced that step number 2, frankly, does bring about what you suggest it does.
So let
As
me
far as,
sorry,
well, let me,
go ahead.
because you laid out a bunch of things, I
Sure.
want to address them. And so I'm not convinced that of that step number 2. I mean, it's an argument. Like I say, I don't think I ever came out and directly, attacked, forced the vote, frankly. I mean, I think I commented on it subsequent to the attack that Jimmy had on AOC. I appreciate, Sarota's article and what you added to it. If you go to forcethevote.org, none of that's on there. And that has been the thrust of the strategy. I agree that there were other things that they could have leveraged. I don't agree on the pay-go being so narrow. In fact, I think there's a tremendous amount of stuff. In fact, everything that is being talked about in the news, the $1.9 trillion, everything from the HEROES Act, which is over $3 trillion bill, could go through that, what you call narrow,
Right. It's narrow, Sam, because it only applies to things that are related to COVID and the Green New Deal.
Everything right now is arguably
Right,
a
but you're
function of the
talking about-
pandemic.
But
We
you're
had
talking
900.
about the COVID bill being enabled by the pay-go exemption, which is true because the pay-go exemption was for
Not just the COVID bill, but everything.
But Sam, it's for COVID-related things and it's for the Green New Deal.
But
And
Joe Biden. But wait a second. Let me just finish this, Brie.
but
The
I just want to
COVID-related thing. Well, but
correct
wait a
us while we
second.
go
No, I
along.
understand. There were things that you said that I disagreed with. I waited till you were done, and then I corrected them. In fact, what I'm talking about is a correction. I think Joe Biden is proposing what I consider to be, and it comes from the HEROES Act, a horrible idea for healthcare, subsidizing COBRA. Okay, which I think everybody agrees is incredibly wasteful. It's just basically a sop to the insurance companies. It was in the HEROES Act as well, and that will be covered by the pay-go exemption. Everything right now can be justified because we are dealing with the greatest economic crisis that we've had in terms of job loss since they took records in 1967. That there is nothing you're hearing about what Joe Biden or Pelosi or anybody is presenting right now is being subjected to pay-go. If it was Medicare for all, if there was a chance, we know that it would lose in the House 325 to 125. It probably would never get a vote in the Senate. If it did, it would lose. I don't know what the numbers would be. It would probably be 55 to 45 best, maybe 70 to 30. But the fact of the matter is that pay-go would, getting rid of pay-go would allow for Medicare for all, but we know it's not going to pass.
Right. That's why one of the objectives was to get rid of pay-go. So one of the things I was arguing that the squad should hold out for and withhold the vote for is a complete eradication of pay-go, a Nancy Pelosi policy that they could have said, I'm not going to vote for you, Nancy Pelosi, until you get rid of pay-go, instead of what they got, which instead was a pay-go exemption for things related to the COVID relief.
But that's everything now.
But it's not.
Brie.
You can't pass Medicare for all using
Why
Bunch of
could you
coomers
pass
in chat.
COBRA subsidies and not Medicare for all?
because it's COVID contingent, and doing a program that's a permanent economy shifting forever program like Medicare for all is not something that, and this is not me saying this, Sam, this is David Dayen immediately weighed in saying, I don't see why people like, my former boss, at The Intercept are trying to pretend like this is something that's bigger than it's not. It is what it is. It allows what it allows, and it's a game. But even if we take the floor vote for Medicare for all completely out of the equation, the fact still remains that this was an opportunity of enormous leverage in which someone could have gotten a lot more than simply what they got. And it's not about characterizing what they did get as big or little or insignificant. Of course, it's important. That's not the issue. The issue is this the best way for them to have maximized the real power that the left had to actually either oust Nancy Pelosi or, in lieu of that, demand significant concessions for the left?
I mean, I think it's, if they end up spending $2 trillion, if they end up spending, like we both agree, right? I mean, can we all agree here that there is no scenario when you talk about force the vote that Medicare for all can possibly happen within the next 2 years, right?
Well, if I can address that point, I was taking notes as well during that last. So that was one of the points that you brought up earlier in your last remarks, which was that you don't know that Medicare for all is a priority for folks, or that passing it during this pandemic would make a material difference.
No, I didn't say that.
The economy, racial inequality is much higher on Americans' minds right now than healthcare. When 45 million people don't have healthcare, you have to imagine if 15 million lose it during the pandemic, many programs pick them up. Many of those people are in red states. So if you're in a blue state, you probably got picked up by some type of Medicaid or something like that, or a jobless program. If you're in a red state, you might not even want healthcare, but you're definitely not a Democrat or a progressive.
Said, I don't think A, it's possible for it to pass now, and B, I'm not convinced the loss of it is going to create any type of mass uprising.
Okay, but you definitely said material difference. I mean, that's just a note that I took down.
In terms of the pandemic? No, I'm
Yes.
saying Medicare for all is absolutely necessary as far as I'm concerned, just broadly speaking. But I don't know that something specific to COVID, short of the fact that I think people are losing their health insurance because of employment. I mean,
Right, but short of that fact, that's a pretty big fact, Sam.
But
15
Brie, it's not going to
newly
pass.
uninsured Americans is a huge deal. And the only reason I believe it's
Nope.
not really being
Most of those
felt-
are in red states. So if they're, like I said, if they're in blue states, they got picked up by health insurance. A lot of Americans, Obamacare's mandate forced Americans to buy into Obamacare insurance plans. A lot of Americans would rather take the risk and have no health care plan than have to pay into a government plan or a private plan. The numbers are not as explicit as she's saying. And this is a country of 340 million people. 15 million isn't enough electorally to actually make a difference. And you have to look at how many of those people are actually voting, how many of those people are available to actually pressure politicians. But she doesn't even understand the baseline of Medicare for all polling, like I talked about in like 10 videos already.
that way in terms of media coverage is because the media isn't covering it as such. And so my point with Force the Vote is not, of course, Sam, nobody here thinks that next week, 2 weeks, a month, even a year after a Force the Vote effort, that we're going to have Medicare for all.
2 years.
And nobody,
What do you imagine the vote count? Just articulate to me.
I'm
What do you
trying.
imagine the vote count will
I'm
be?
trying in this moment to articulate to you what the goal of Force the Vote was, because it was never about
Getting
passing
Medicare for all.
Medicare. No, it was not about passing Medicare for all. Because here's the issue, Sam. It's if your argument is we should only do things if they guarantee a win
That's
in this
not my
moment.
argument at all.
Okay, well then you can make your argument. But my point is that if that is the way someone saw the world, of course you wouldn't believe in Medicare for all.
Straw manning in real time.
You wouldn't believe in Force the Vote, rather. But if you had a longer historical perspective and understood that, for example, when in the lead up to women's suffrage, they did this exact same thing. They forced a vote that
You mean the 70-year struggle for women's suffrage, starting in the 1850s and ending after the First World War? How is this comparable whatsoever?
failed, but which galvanized a lot more public attention to the need for women's suffrage. And subsequently, about a year later, they were able, because of that upswell of energy and
After
attention,
the war.
to attend to it. So what you said earlier was that it will make people rise up. And
Did that happen in
that
2017?
felt a little flippant. Well, hey, let's take your point about the 2017 vote. One of the arguments being made by the anti-force the vote crowd is that if we do this, we'll lose political will and it will set back the case for Medicare for all. But by your own admission, they did this in 2017 and subsequently got more co-sponsors for Medicare for all than we've ever had in American history. So the argument that somehow this is going to cost us politically, I think, is really unfounded.
Correlation doesn't equal causation. We should all know this, of course. But Hippie Dippy Podcast, if I get invited on any shows, I will go on them. I just don't get invited. Sorry.
Now, I can't prove to you it's
I
going
didn't
to bring us
make that
anything.
argument.
But Sam, let me just finish this, since I let you finish as well. I can't promise you any outcome. But in light of how limited the potential costs are, the idea that you wouldn't take this opportunity to withhold the vote to maximize what you can get, whether or not it's a floor vote in Medicare for all, whether it's PAYGO exemptions, whether or not it's getting rid of Richard Neal as the head of the Ways and Means Committee, or any number of the suggestions given by David Sirota, what we saw is that the vote was never held. And instead, a bunch of concessions that who knows what the negotiations were like behind the scenes that ultimately didn't add up to much were held out as some big get in a way that felt really disingenuous. And I think that that's why so many people on the left find there to be a credibility crisis. It's not that they hate AOC or hate the squad or want to throw anybody away, but they want to hear a better response and acknowledgement about why it seems like they sold this enormously important progressive issue for so cheap.
Well, first off, I think the conflation between the idea that forcing a losing vote, which I think we can all agree, right? I mean, I'm not saying anything wrong that you disagree with, 325 to 125.
No one
Right.
believed.
No
the
vote
point
in the
was
Senate.
never that was going
Okay,
to.
okay. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with this.
Yeah.
The idea that people are conflating a pursuit of Medicare for all with this particular tactic is wrong. Now, if you want to talk about other things that could have been leveraged, I mean, look,
We were talking about them.
Yes, don't say not supporting force the vote means you're anti-Medicare for all. They're being so absolutist and pure about this. It's purity politics 101. If you don't support force the vote, you don't really support Medicare for all, do you? You don't really want Americans to have health care. That's what she is saying. Medicare for all and force the vote are two separate issues, two completely separate issues.
We need to talk about that.
You can't conflate the two.
I'm willing to I think you have an argument that maybe it would have been better not to get PAYGO. Maybe it would have been better to get this. But let's play this scenario out. You say there's nothing to lose in this strategy whatsoever. I can tell you that the fact that AOC has led the sort of the challenging, I mean, presumably I've heard, and maybe this is wrong. The idea is that the people who vote against Medicare for all, and I don't think we have a president who was elected by saying that even if the House and the Senate were to pass Medicare for all, he will veto it. So we have a disagreement as to what we think the public is going to react to at this point and how they will react. Okay, fine. My sense is that losing vote would not galvanize the population. You would not get people on the streets. You would not get that type of push that you got with suffrage, for instance.
Why not?
$2,000 checks are an issue supported by 80% of the American public, and rejecting those literally got nobody in the streets anywhere.
Well, so that's the central point.
When the Senate rejected that
disagreement, because as you said earlier, Sam, surely we all agree that under this Congress, that as it's currently constituted, as we know what individual members of Congress are on the record about Medicare for all, they will not pass it. But the idea is that a failing vote, and as Brie is saying, the momentum created by that, the media attention created by that, the starkness of it would.
Oh yes, this is another notion they believe. They think Americans during these insane times throughout, and by the way, this is right before the Capitol was stormed. During these insane times, they're going to be staring at C-SPAN to watch AOC's unfiltered, amazing speech. That's going to be like a cartoon, like a movie. Everybody's going to be for Medicare for all magically after that. It's a cartoonish view of politics. And if they don't stare at C-SPAN to see this stuff, they'd be watching it through MSNBC and CNN, which would filter it through a media lens that would hurt the optics of Medicare for all and what the House progressives would be doing.
Would push the matter. I mean, and frankly, I do also want to interrogate this one point that you just made, that Biden is a guy who won the Democratic primary, saying I'm for Medicare for all, I'm not going to sign that into law, I'm against that. But do you really think that if and again, we're not necessarily going to this point, and this is hypothetical, but that if the Senate with 50 votes passed Medicare for all and the House with enough votes, he would simply not sign it, or do you not think there's enough momentum? I got to think point that he would say, well, all right, yeah.
I got to think if Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema and Mark Kelly and John Hickenlooper, and they voted for it, and if the other 125 members of the House who were not going to vote for it voted for it, I would imagine that Joe Biden would sign it. My point is that it did not hurt Joe Biden enough to deny him the Democratic nomination or the presidency. Well, I think in part because of the media, if you want to say, but that's going to be the same media that you're relying on to cover a vote that loses
exactly
325 to 120.
How do you get past that, Sam?
Well, I think, frankly, what we need is more power. I have a different sense of than yours as to the power of the left. For instance, okay, now look, I was not one of those people who slammed the people who went out to protest on the Capitol steps about the force of the vote.
Good job, Sam.
There wasn't many people there. I saw one clip from it where someone is mentioning my name as being part of why this doesn't happen. And I can tell you this, if Sam Seder is the obstacle to getting Medicare for all, you perceive it, Sam Seder, as the obstacle to getting Medicare for all.
I know where he lives.
I am sitting in front of IKEA panels right now.
I know where he lives. I'm going to drop his address in the chat, and you can go rush that studio right now, and we can get Medicare for all right now.
I mean, I just think that we don't have the power that's there. And I think the danger, what you can lose in trying to use a phone as a hammer is you can break the phone.
Can I just address that? I want to take that good faith version of that argument that you just made.
That
like really, truly, I want to drill down on this. This is serious stuff. Okay. The argument being made to you, Sam, is not that you individually hold all the power in the world, but that there is whatever left media structure we have is fairly limited. And both you and the Young Turks are take up an enormous percentage.
Dude, she cannot say this while at the same time excusing everything Jimmy Dore does.
Of that left media space.
I think Jimmy has a bigger audience than I do.
Yeah, he does, but that's not the point. You and
that is your point.
Together take up an enormous amount of that space. Jimmy has his own platform.
I have no idea what their perspective on this was.
Okay, and then in terms of beyond the left media space, who else has influence in the left media? Well, there's unions and there's the DSA, right? And so if Young Turks takes up, I don't know, probably 80% of the left. I don't know how big they are, but obviously they're the main player.
80%?
If Young Turks comes out against an idea, if you come out against an idea,
I didn't,
or you decline to support it, and Sam, I think you're not being entirely honest about the kinds of things that were said on your show, even if you personally didn't say that. I'm not holding you responsible for them, but the Sam Seder universe was extremely antagonistic toward force the vote.
By the way, she just ignored the entire thing, the point about the media being the one that's going to cover the actual force the vote stuff if it happened. And by the way, she's saying that the Sam Seder media, whatever, is Sam Seder's media group on Twitter or whatever is against it because she's only on Twitter and that's all she sees. She sees her mentions on Twitter and gets mad every single day. And she's like, this is why we can't have Medicare for all because people are mean to me on Twitter.
I think it was frankly for me personally, I was antagonistic to the idea that it very quickly, very, very quickly turned into AOC is a sellout. She's a fraud. She's
That's
not.
fine, Sam, but I'm sitting.
But wait a second. But you asked what the cost is. The cost is that.
No,
the cost is
no. I didn't ask you.
And I'll tell you something. I have historical perspective on this. We have, for the first time, we have taken out more establishment Democrats in the past 2 years. Not exclusively because of her, obviously Injustice Democrats. But
I really just wanted to make the point that I was making, though, which wasn't about any of that. And I would like to say my name is Brianna Joy Gray, not Jammie Dore. So I would think we should talk about and
talk about force the vote.
Okay.
And there's the first name that is listed.
If I can finish the sentence, I think that we can and should talk about the effect of the approach that Jammie Dore took. But in this statement that I'm making right now, what I'm trying to say is the argument that was being made is not that you have all the control in the world, but there was an enormous resistance that felt, I'm not saying coordinated as though it was planned, but all the big players were either silent on the issue or were anti-force the vote for whatever reason, okay? And what that does ultimately is take what could be a spiral of energy and natural enthusiasm that came up around the idea and deflate it.
So you just wouldn't be real.
Suppressing an idea, which you can agree with suppressing the idea. It's your right, it's your show, it's your platform. But the DSA declined to weigh in.
I'm not the DSA.
That's fine. But the DSA declined to weigh in. The nurses union declined to weigh in. Young Turks was antagonistic to it as an institution, even though 80% of its viewership supported the idea. And you did too. So it feels a little unfair to say nobody showed up, and not you, but other people were mocking that idea after having worked so hard to stem the natural organic tide of enthusiasm around it.
Okay. Well, I mean, it is impossible to separate Jammie from this. You said yourself. You heard about it from me, which I got it from Jammie. Jammie is the first name outside of Nancy Pelosi's on the forcethevote.org. For a long time, there was two supporting agents, and the first one was Jammie Dore's logo down there. Jammie Dore turned this into a litmus test for progressives
100%.
as to whether they were actually on our side. And you asked about the cost. And when it became clear to me that this was going to cost a lot more, like I say, I was open to the idea from a perspective of 1,000 flowers bloom. I didn't necessarily think it was the greatest thing in the world. I thought maybe there were other asks that you could get. But as soon as he took the energy, and it was all emanating from him and around him, he was on every one of those conversations. You mentioned Sirota and conversations that you had. He was in I didn't see all of them, but all the ones that I did see, he was there. Whether it was 5 or 6 other people, he was there dominating the conversations. And this turned into a project for him. And it was, I don't know on that Slack that I saw the images on that Slack. I don't know how representative that was, but it at the very least captured what I found to be problematic of it. And I thought that was the cost. Because,
by the way, the Humanist report was for force the vote, but they still called him a neoliberal mainstream shill when he said to move on from it and that he actually likes the squad. So it did become a litmus test all throughout like Twitter and the online spirit. And she can't, by the way, she's contradicting herself when she says, Sam Seder's influence is so important for this, but the way Jammie Dore presents it isn't. Like, come on, dude. The entire People's Party, that third party thing, they're literally sharing Jammie Dore videos. The person who runs the People's Party is best friends with Jammie Dore. Like, this entire thing is a Dore operation. It's a Dore, like, it's a Nico House, a Jammie Dore, Brianna Joy Gray. It's all these, reactionary progressives, which is sort of that works. They are reactionary progressives, if you want to say that. But
from my perspective,
by the way, please consider liking the stream so it gets caught in the algorithm, of course. And thank you, everybody who is subscribing.
Had my historical context, I have watched for 15, 20 years an inability to primary Democrats who are establishment Democrats or conservative Democrats. Donna Edwards, I think, was the last one that we saw, and that was in 2006, maybe. And that was a big deal. And I don't even think she was that far to the left, frankly, relative to where people are today. and yet, the central figure, and if you go back and you look at too, like things like, if you look at the reporting on the Energy and Commerce Committee that AOC was shut out of because she was doing that primary, had that, I think there was a couple articles that made the point that had that vote been public, they would have been very nervous about voting against her. And that means that the value and the power that she has to do with her Twitter following, her capacity to raise money, her popularity on the left, and to go after that and fundamentally undercut that. And if I have power, Jammie Dore has more power. And to undercut that and for the sake of a losing vote where supposedly it was about 2 years later, you're going to primary those people, although she is the central figure who are helping primary those figures. It did not make sense to me. That was the cost. As far as arguing whether, and that was the cost of the force the vote movement, whether there was a cost for the Progressive Caucus or those 15 people to vote against Nancy Pelosi. I also have an argument. I don't know if I buy it, but I mean, I'm not a sitting congressperson. But let's say Nancy Pelosi says, fine, don't vote for me. They lose the speakership, right? Because there's no one going to coalesce around. You're not going to get that 218 people to coalesce around another person. They're going to end up. It's going to end up being McCarthy. Because
that's just not true, Sam. That's just fundamentally not true.
Walk through this. I'm going to give you my scenario about this. I'm going to give you my scenario. They say no, we're not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi. We're going to vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, and if you got what was the 218 to 212 or something, right? What I can't remember.
I believe it was 216 to 212 with a majority of 215 because if memory serves, 429 votes were cast, requiring a majority of 215.
So you
Democrats
now need,
had at the time, I believe, about 219, 220.
The progressive holdouts. Let's say there's 10 of them. Okay, they vote for Hakeem Jeffries. It has to be less than that because the majority is not the majority of people who are voting. It's the majority of people who vote for a named candidate, right? You know this.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, okay, so let's say Nancy Pelosi calls their bluff. Don't vote for me. And they vote for Hakeem Jeffries. It goes into, enough of only like 4 of them vote for Hakeem Jeffries so that there is no majority. They have to revote, right? Yeah. And then
Maxwell, I'm not for forced to vote. I am for getting concessions, which they did. You can argue about their concessions aren't good enough, but I was for getting something for their vote. That is a pragmatic thing to do. But forced to vote is the opposite of anything pragmatic or based in reality. Literally, barely half the party supports Medicare for all as their #1 healthcare option. Barely half the Democratic Party. 70% of the party views Pelosi as favorable. 55% of the party thinks she should still be speaker. Only 30% said she shouldn't be speaker. And the people that said she shouldn't be speaker said it because of old age. A lot of them still like Pelosi. So you're holding up a vote for a figure who is very popular in Pelosi in the party that only supports your idea by about half proportion. You're holding up that vote, and the people that support Pelosi, those people just happen to be the base in the party that don't support Medicare for all yet. So we need Pelosi's voters. How do you get Pelosi's voters? How do you get those voters? Those are the people in the party. We need to change their minds. How do we do that? But when AOC tries getting these more liberal voters, these more centrist voters, by going on The View and saying something like Mama Bear, calling Pelosi Mama Bear, which I think is bad, she's trying to get those voters. She's at least trying to get a voter base that she doesn't have yet. That is how this works. That is how getting political power works. You don't just play to your own base. You have to expand. It needs to be about addition, not just subtraction, and about purity.
What happens? Either they have the same vote that they had before, or they switch to Pelosi, or they maybe other people vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
So
it goes to a second round.
It goes to a second or third or fourth or a 50th round of voting.
Second round. Now you have 15 people who vote for Hakeem Jeffries, 215 who vote for McCarthy, and 205 who vote for Nancy Pelosi. What happens then, Virgil?
Wait, hang on. Why would the memory serves McCarthy got 212 votes? So you're not saying that number goes up?
No, I'm suggesting in round two,
nobody can marshal a majority, so it goes to round 3.
No. You don't need you need a plurality of names.
That's not true.
It would require Democrats would have to vote for Kevin McCarthy to be speaker. Or a large number would have to abstain altogether.
Yes,
thank you, Mutter Distortion. I am your Mama Bear.
You need a majority of the people voting for a name.
Okay, so let's say,
which is to say, not voting present, which means that if every single Democrat shows up and they vote for someone, then unless they have a majority within that caucus, I'll say it's not a majority, and this is again assuming the Republicans voted as a bloc and they're a minority, and no Democrat is going to vote for McCarthy, obviously, then it's just going to keep going to successive ballots.
Right.
And this is not an unprecedented situation. Right. It's simply a situation we've not had in 100 years.
And importantly, this could go on for dozens of rounds, as it did in the historical precedent that Virgil is nodding to. And this is where we start to talk about media attention and spectacle, where Nancy Pelosi, who 3/4 of Americans want to step down, a bipartisan majority of people can't stand Nancy Pelosi.
3/4 of Americans, but we're talking about taking over the Democratic Party. The only way we can actually get political power to actually change things in America, we need to take over the Democratic Party. That's what the Justice Democrats are supposed to do. All that matters is her approval rating in the Democratic Party. That's all we're talking about right now.
Pelosi, who was
We
down.
got to talk about Democrats
was
because
down-
the Republicans, the
like
Republicans
half-
are irrelevant.
Yes,
yeah, like
Sam.
half of
Thank you.
Democrats want her. I think it's majority of Democrats want her to
Okay,
step down. So the
Nope.
question
Wrong.
is,
False.
isn't this part of the spectacle that we're trying to create around the issue of why 15 million people just lost their health insurance and what the government is going to do about it in this moment? So we don't end up in a situation where Joe Biden is saying, let's do more COBRA payments, let's give more giveaways to the private insurance industry. And even if it doesn't result, obviously, in Medicare for all tomorrow, what it does is finally force has the best chance of forcing a conversation on this issue that I can imagine happening at all. So unless we give an alternative of how we're going to force
The
during this
subsequent
crisis
things that
moment.
followed that vote probably would have sucked up a lot of that attention.
Yeah,
Now,
no, the
you
attention
didn't
is
know
good.
that, of course. You didn't know that, of course, before the force the vote. But presumably, over those days, you would have probably still paid more attention to the insurrection of the Capitol.
Right,
Now, you
but
don't know
the
that because you don't know how things are going to play out. And
They could have
the
scheduled the vote. They
assuredness-
could have scheduled the hearings for any time
the-
also.
well, I'm saying the spectacle that would have come from that vote on the 4th would have been would have ended, of course, on the 6th. And
Sure, but again, we didn't know that at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
We couldn't know that
Right,
at
no,
all.
of course. I mean, and then you also would have held up the vote.
I knew
for,
that. I
guess,
predicted
to
it.
certify the vote, right? I mean, how would you do that?
Wait,
and-
sorry, your question is, how do we certify the vote because there was a law that we didn't know?
Thank you, Alexis, for the $2 donation with a thumbs up, a red thumbs up. Thank you.
And I haven't.
No. I'm saying in terms of we haven't organized,
let
we
me-
don't have a Speaker of the House yet at that point. But my point is like the assuredness that the force of the vote people had enough so that the Progressive Caucus members who didn't do what they said were sellouts. To me, I'm sorry. I just think that's ludicrous.
Okay,
And
so
like
let me
I
ask
say,
you this.
I never
It is
even
ludicrous.
criticized.
Oh, really quick. Thank you, Lucas, for the 59. I think that's Swedish currency, right? But thank you. She's gonna switch here. Force to vote in general. I don't know. She seems pretty like ego driven. She doesn't want to change off this point. Force to vote is her like child here, and she is defending her child. Like, have you ever heard like a soccer mom talk about her child and how they're the best player on the team? That's sort of what force to vote is to Brianna Joy Gray.
Forced the vote until it became apparent to me it was part of Jimmy's sort of project, to attack the Democrats and particularly the progressives. I mean, he did that when she was elected before she even won the general election. He attacked AOC for endorsing Andrew Cuomo
Okay.
in the general election. I mean,
So
and then I
I'm-
realized I'd been duped.
My name's Brianna, and regardless, Jimmy Dore
Well,
could go
come
and
on, you
kill
brought up the
15.
DSA, you
Okay.
brought up the nurses, you
That's
brought up the media, you brought up David Sirota.
Honestly, Sam, if I could just get the sentence out, we can talk about Jimmy Dore can go and kill 15 kids tomorrow, and I still believe in force the vote. So there are ways that I think we can talk about. My name's Brianna, and regardless, Jimmy Dore could go
Well, come
and
on, you
kill
brought up
15.
the DSA, you
Okay.
brought up nurses, you
That's
brought up the media, you brought up David Sirota.
Honestly, Sam, if I could just get the sentence out.
She's like, Sam, can I just get this sentence out? And this is what she had to say. It was this important for her to say this. She's like, I need to talk about this, Sam. Stop interrupting me. This is a really important point. This is the most important point I made all night.
We can talk about Jimmy Dore can go and kill 15 kids tomorrow, and I still believe in force the vote. So there are ways that I think we can talk about the effect of Jimmy Dore's.
Thank you for the $5 super chat, Spencer. Pelosi supporters actually vote. Yeah, that is true. Her supporters are old and they do actually vote. That is true, sadly.
Argumentative style on this
Well,
discourse.
it's not an argumentative style. It's
Okay.
not- I don't mind his style. I think that when you put out and make the argument over and over again that she's a sellout and they're a fraud,
Okay,
I think that does
we
damage.
can and we should talk about that, but that's different than making an argument for why force the vote is good or bad. And
If you ask me why I didn't support it, that's why. Because
Okay,
I didn't want to
so-
associate myself with
Okay.
a
so
tactic.
that's honest. That's honest.
yeah.
You're not saying that you actually think that force the vote was an effective strategy or a bad idea. You didn't like that it was
I thought it was
associated with
middling.
Jimmy Dore.
I thought, like I've said,
He
I've
made
said
like
this-
50 points about why force the vote was a bad idea. She's making it about Jimmy Dore now. She's the one that made it about media figures. He said nothing about like Jimmy Dore directly correlating to force the vote other than making it a litmus test for if you're a real progressive or not. He literally just spent freaking a half hour talking about why force the vote is bad because of polling, because of political precedent, because of Pelosi and the actual process.
3 times on this, and I thought it was a middling idea. When I found out that they were leveraging other stuff that I thought had more material benefit and not
But it doesn't have more
substantive-
material benefit
I
because
think-
they could
I
have
think
asked at least for
listen,
to get rid of
you
all
and I have a
pay-go.
disagreement. I believe that exempting pay-go,
But they didn't
at a time
exempt
when
pay-go.
there is- excuse me, at a time where we desperately need funding, we need expansion on on all sorts of things, ranging from expanded unemployment insurance. We need checks. We need, I mean, all of that. I think that was a valuable get.
It was valuable, but it wasn't a get.
Huh?
It was valuable, but it wasn't a get. You have no knowledge if their failure to force the vote resulted in getting those things, if those things were already planned concessions or not. Moreover, part of my demand was to get rid of PAYGO entirely. So if we're talking about the material value of either of those things,
yes, your demand was you. Look, I'm saying there is an argument, okay, but neither one of us knows how much you could have leveraged at this point. Well, here's you want to argue that you think that their negotiations, that their ask wasn't big enough. Fine, I don't have a big.
That is what I'm arguing. Here's why.
But as to why I wanted to distance myself as fast as I could, because I'm not going to be part of a project that disempowers for what I think is a highly speculative tactic that I think is dubious, frankly. But again, I was perfectly willing to just let 1,000 flowers bloom, like you said. There was no strategy on my part to go like, I'm going to support this so that Brie signs on to it, for instance, and then I'm going to pull the rug out. No, it was and to say that Jimmy's not associated with force the vote.
I didn't say that Jimmy's not associated with force the vote.
To say that he wasn't the biggest advocate or the person most close to
social. Very central to it. It was his idea.
That is why when he started to use it as a leverage to disempower the progressives in Congress, I decided I'm done.
So I'd like to address that point, if I may. I don't believe that Jammie is trying to disempower the progressives in Congress.
He literally just calls Bernie Sanders. He just called Bernie Sanders a corporate piece of the establishment like a week ago. Bernie freaking Sanders, dude. Cori Bush, AOC, they're all not real. Jamal Bowman, they're all not real. He would rather them not even be in Congress because he doesn't want to take the time to learn how, polling works or any of this. Like, come on, dude. If you get to the point where you're saying Cori Bush isn't a real progressive, like, come on. You have to understand that's complete lunacy.
What I believe Jammie is doing, whether or not you agree with him or the tactic he's using, is trying to use his platform to pressure the elected officials, the progressives that we have worked so hard and have this unprecedented number, to your point, in Congress, to do the thing that we want them to do, which is to use power when it falls in their lap. Now, in this instance, we didn't need to get a majority of progressives in Congress to enact the plan. That was the whole spark and magic of it. That with a very small number of people.
Well, let's take that first premise, though.
By the way, Jimmy Dore never comments on trans issues. He never comments on it, but you know what Tulsi thinks about it and what like Nico House thinks about it. I want to hear Jimmy Dore's unironic opinion about these issues.
Take the first premise that you made, the assertion that
he's
you
pretty
don't think
bad on it from what I've seen. He's not really that socially progressive.
I feel like I'm
maybe a libertarian.
I feel like I've been letting you.
Okay, go.
If I could just finish this point. I have like a whole notepad of notes that I'm trying to catch up on from the various issues that you brought up that I think are important to address. Jimmy's perspective, I don't want to speak for him, but it seems obvious to me what he's doing is to be the farthest, angriest version of the left, to create political pressure on progressives to do what they said they were going to do when they ran for office. One of those, AOC in particular, since she's come under focus, said that she wanted to oust Pelosi. She complained just this past January, a year ago now, that it was regrettable that the Democratic Party was so moderate, so to the right, that we couldn't even get a floor vote on Medicare for all. That's almost a direct quote. So what Jimmy's trying to do is say, I don't care about AOC per se. I don't care about the squad per se. I'm invested in these individuals insofar as that they're advancing the interests of the progressive movement and are fighting tooth and nail for the policies that caused us to support them in the first place. And he is willing to become the antagonist in that.
And also, if you don't take up my stupid strategy that isn't thought out, then you're not a real progressive. He forgot to add that part.
By being the most ferocious attack dog to push them.
Anger doesn't mean it's good politically. Like, we just saw what happened at the Capitol. We saw what the entire right looks like in America now after Trumpism. Like, especially liberal voters, they don't respond well to violence or whatever. You have to attack the demographics you need to gain. What demographics will give you political power to actually create effective change? If that demographic means you have to be really nice with the media and go on The View and be really clean and be really civility focused, then we need to get that base somehow. Like, we all love the picture of Bernie Sanders, the biggest meme of all time, him sitting in the chair at the inauguration, and people saying like, the Democratic Party needs to take note. Bernie Sanders is always focused on the issues of the working people in America. He's not really caring about all this, grandiose Grammy-style presentation for politics. But what we have to pay attention to as well, like, we love, people that fight for the working class. But liberals that are not voting for progressives right now, they like the reality TV show civility stuff. They like the really clean politics. They like the people who are going to be really, really cheerful in front of cameras and dance for social media. They like people like that. So how do we get those voters? How do we do both at once? AOC, She's on the picket lines and she's on The View. She has political power in her appeal to such a broad base, normie Democrats and progressive populist Democrats. Her throwing that away ruins political power for progressives in general. She alone being that receptive to so many audiences, or being received so well by so many audiences, is political power within itself. And this right here would really hurt her political power by standing up to Pelosi, who is more popular than her, who is seen as a leader in the party.
To go. If AOC were to say, hey, this is my plan for Medicare for all, and,
But yeah, we
and
all
demonstrate
like the Bernie
a fighting
stuff.
spirit, there's no one in this world, I think, who would imagine that Jammie
Like,
Dore
we like the Bernie stuff. We like that. We have to, this is a big thing about my channel, dude. It doesn't matter what we love. It doesn't matter what we perceive as well. We need to get voters, you know? We're trying to get people. Oh, by the way, Nighthawk, thank you for the tier 3 membership. A new, oh, and also $5 from Steve Vertigo. The anti-SJW left overlaps heavily with these dumb things like Bernie or Bust or Forced to Vote. Kyle is pretty transphobic, for example, and Nico too. I haven't seen Kyle. I'm not going to say that without actually seeing it, but Nico definitely.
would just randomly keep antagonizing her for no reason. No, he's not. Doesn't have a vendetta out against AOC.
I
Whether
like
or not
Kyle.
I think
Kyle
is
is
most useful is a different question. But he doesn't have a vendetta
Good.
out against AOC because he hates her or something. It's because he simply wants her
Yeah,
to
I've never seen
conform with
anything
her
bad
own campaign
from Kyle.
promises. So I want to put to you, Sam, what is the point of having these people in Congress if, when they have real power to leverage, they decline to do it?
I disagree.
I still like Kyle Kulinski.
With your assessment of how much power they had in this instance.
We do disagree that they could have held up the vote for Nancy Pelosi and ensured that she didn't get seated if they wanted to, given the way the voting structure that we just talked about.
They could have gotten rid of Nancy Pelosi by voting for McCarthy.
Well, sure, but they also could have gotten rid of.
Do you think they should have done that? Would you? Let me ask you this.
No, obviously not. So,
Okay,
do you think they should have done it by voting for Barbara Lee and holding up the votes until there was a
what?
consensus? Until they get enough
Do you
concessions.
think that the Democrats? Do you think the Democrats do you think the Democrats in Congress, and do you think the Democrats in the general population, if let's say AOC and Tlaib and Omar and I don't know, Bowman and one or two others, Cori Bush, if they were preventing Nancy Pelosi from becoming Speaker of the House, where do you think public opinion would fall on this?
Within, because 3/4 of Americans revile Nancy Pelosi. That's the whole point.
You think that Democrats would do that?
No, I think
you and I have a different assessment of what would happen in that scenario.
MSNBC and CNN and mainstream Democrats are going to very much side with Nancy Pelosi. I think the American public is going to aggressively side with the squad. I'm sorry?
How many
Why would the American public side with the squad? They have good appeal in the party, but not like across ideological lines or party lines. Oh, thank you for the $10, Maxwell. But, Jolah, you understand why I'm more likely to go to a protest after Jimmy's show than I am to buy a bag of coffee after the majority report. I don't care that Jimmy sucks. I care that he evokes something in me. Now, this is what I'm asking of you. We need to focus on what others are thinking, on what other voters are thinking, what's going to get more political power for us. Although what we do might not always feel the best to us ideologically or principle-wise, whatever is going to help us create change quickest and get more voters is what matters. It matters what other people are going to be receptive of, not just what we enjoy. Like, we can always find stuff we like. It doesn't matter what we like anymore. We're already there. How do we get more people? How do we get more people to support Medicare for All, to support the squad, to support progressive candidates and policies?
Mainstream Democrats do you think there are in this country?
What do you mean? The mainstream Democrats don't like Nancy Pelosi. I'm talking about pundits. I'm talking about people on TV.
Pundits, but I'm talking about when you talk about public opinion, you're saying that all the major vehicles to shape public opinion are going to be against those five who prevent Nancy Pelosi from being Speaker of the House.
Right, but it won't matter. It will redound negatively against them, just like it did, by the way, when the mainstream media lined up against Donald Trump, who still somehow managed to win in 2016. Here's the thing: the media can influence public opinion, but at a certain point, even they have to conform if they don't want to lose their audience. So this is a given.
You and I have a disagreement on what would happen in that scenario. And we do.
Your feeling is that the public at large is going to say, "Oh, I hated Nancy Pelosi before, but now we're going to all side with her and against these enormously popular group of young black and brown."
The public at large is going to be so tired of conflict at that point that the idea that they're going to rally around AOC and Ilhan Omar and Cori Bush because they're preventing Nancy Pelosi from seating, I think that's fantastical.
Okay, well, we have a very, very different.
We have a disagreement on that.
Of what it means for 75% of people.
But since you started that with what Jammie Dore's intentions are, okay, I'm sorry. The fact of the matter is that AOC, as a freshman Congress person, her strength comes from the fact that she is one of the biggest fundraisers in Congress. She does it all from small donations.
From us. Yeah.
Exactly. And
From us.
I think, I don't know what Jimmy Dore's intentions are. Maybe you do. I have watched Jimmy Dore for many years now, and I do remember when he attacked AOC as a sellout for in the general election supporting Andrew Cuomo. I don't know what motivates him, but I can tell you what the impact was. And the impact is that Fraud Squad went out there, and when AOC did not get that seat on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is a crucial committee if you want to talk about Medicare for all, there was no pushback whatsoever. There was no, and so we didn't have her back there. And in other words, basically,
why did we have her back there, Sam?
They were able to disempower us by not giving us a voice on that committee, and they got no pushback from it.
AOC, the fact that AOC is reliant on her base for her power is the reason why AOC should listen to her base and not Nancy Pelosi. You have
I'm not convinced.
AOC's base, if you took a tally, would not want her to do this. Maybe her base on Twitter, but you have to understand, her base is not really on Twitter. Doesn't only 5% of the American public in general use Twitter? Like only 5%? Like, you know how many normie Democrats really do support AOC? Yeah, I do stream at awkward times. I'm sorry, Coco. I don't have any plans set up. By the way, everybody who's new here, please consider subscribing and liking the stream. Pragmatic progressivism, you know
I'm not convinced that the base is so big. You have 41,000 people who signed that petition.
Well, which is it, Sam?
There was 100 people out there.
You can't have it both ways. Is it that force the vote made it so that no one had AOC's back when she was denied the energy and commerce position? Or is it that AOC's base is still with her and Jimmy Dore's base
the far sexier story for the media was about, the fraud squad hashtag.
First of all, the media barely covered that. The lefty media was interested, the internet was interested, but as with most things, it takes a big splash. It takes AOC herself to draw attention to the issue.
Wait, so she understands
that? The only reason, I want to be clear about this, the only reason we're talking about AOC and why she's such a focus of this is because she inserted herself into this conversation in the thread with
Jesse Jackson. Yes. AOC was so dumb to respond to the message on Twitter, but she cares too much about responding to her constituents and all that stuff. But she should have never hopped into it. Thank you so much, Leo, for the $10 and just a thank you. No message, just thank you. Is that a peach? No, that's not a peach. I don't know. I don't know fruits. That's not a peach though. That's the opposite of a peach. That's not nothing about that looks like a peach whatsoever. But I still thought it was. I don't even know. A lot
of bad faith discourse about the focus on AOC. I think there is now at this point some undue focus on her.
Yeah,
it's all of them together. And I think that she's taking the heat for the inaction of a lot of other squad members who should also be in focus right now, and people who are progressives but not in the squad. But
right now, we should be rallying about getting Katie Porter a waiver so that she can sit on the financial services.
I know.
That could have been one of the demands if they decided to force the vote. They could have actually demanded specific committee positions, but they gave up their power.
That would have been a better thing to ask for. I don't know.
Well, Sam, I don't know what you were asking for, but part of the vote campaign I was a part of explicitly said that we were going to ask for committee seats.
That same thing that you were part of was basically saying fraud squad, and I wanted nothing to do with that.
Sam, the fraud squad hashtag didn't even emerge until after the vote came out. So I'm not really sure.
I'm sorry. What I'm talking about. It's the only time I came out publicly. The first time I came out publicly with any negativity associated with that was when Jimmy Dore did that video. You know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about. I know that fraud squad trended the day of the vote.
In terms of his agenda, one of the things that came out on that Slack, as you know, was that there was a lot of
people. I don't know anything about anything. I'm not a part of the Slack. The Slack I'm a part of is the DSA Slack. I logged into it. I had a bunch of people making fun of me as well. But I didn't use that to condemn the entire DSA.
I want to know what the video. I would like to know what the video is and what Sam has to say.
On the Slack channel, apparently somebody leaked some things, and there was a lot of people on there who were saying this is important for the movement for a People's Party to show that to make it out as if the progressives in the Democratic caucus are useless, and there is no reason for a progressive party, for a People's Party, if they're effective. And
that's literally what Joyce, what he says.
The Slack said was, no, I saw the clip. I don't have firsthand knowledge of the Slack because I'm not in the Slack. So when you said, as you well know, I thought you were implying that I was a part of that Slack conversation.
No, I'm not part of the Slack either. I just saw those.
Well, pardon me, but the screen grab that was circulated by Ryan Grimm on Twitter said that if the squad doesn't do this, if the squad doesn't use their power, it's a demonstration of why we need third parties. And we can use this moment to demonstrate why we need outside pressure from someone like the People's Party, because people who are a part of the Democratic Party are obviously unwilling or unable to flex the kind of muscle that we need to move the progressive movement forward. Now, you can frame that as, I'm trying to kill the squad so that we can get FP.
Well, I think that's very consistent with what Jimmy's been doing. He's been pushing for a third party for the past 6 years.
True. This is a good strategy. And it did come out, right, that they're pushing for force to vote to make people hate progressives in Congress so that they're more open to a third party option. Oh, thank you for the $5 Modern Distortion. Don't spend it in one place. I won't. Don't worry. I'll find a place where something costs less than $5. Do I like Paris? I don't know. Yeah, by the way, I feel like Virgil's being moved a little bit to Sam's side. I feel like he's a little bit open to what Sam is saying here. He seems pretty interested in it. I'm not sure if anybody else is getting that vibe, though.
And so, I mean, first it was the Green Party, and then it was, and frankly, again, I remember what Jimmy's prescription was. People can go and look at the debate that I had with Jimmy Dore in 2016, where he told me that Donald Trump was going to get nothing done, and it would bring us Elizabeth Warren. That was his argument. Plus, he didn't know what a filibuster was. And if we're talking about, I mean, you made some assertions about what Jimmy's intentions are. This is my understanding of Jimmy's intentions are in this context. And frankly, honestly, I felt like I got completely duped and did not when I actually was took Jimmy's first video and proposal for this. I was far more I was naive about thinking that like, oh well, this is, I should have known. And I have to say that like
what does outside pressure look like? Shall we chant, oh she's great, or do your effing job? I think we should be focusing on issues and standing up for workers. We shouldn't be talking to politicians directly in any sense. We should be supporting what's around them, supporting the actual people on the ground. That's what we should be doing as progressives. We shouldn't be doing anything to people on the inside. Outside politics is different from inside politics.
I felt deep.
There's no reason to protest a politician like that.
I was duped.
Literally no reason. Protest the shitty politician that everyone hates.
Trying to dupe people. I think
not progressives that are the most popular progressives in the country. You don't do that to them. Like it makes no pragmatic sense whatsoever. It makes no sense for progress whatsoever.
And I realized.
You see the picket line AOC showed up at? Go to a picket line and support them. Get off freaking Twitter. Stop getting on these politicians' asses when they're the most progressive people to ever serve in our House, the most progressive people to ever be in our United States freaking Congress. Don't spend your time doing that shit. Spend your time on shit that actually matters. Not this bullshit reality TV show stuff. Thank you for the $5, Ron. BJG was adamant about not voting for Biden. Yeah, I feel like voting for Biden saves a lot of lives too, by the way. Like she talks about Medicare for all saving $60,000 a year on healthcare. I think voting for Biden throughout this COVID pandemic, although he sucks too, but Trump literally had no plan after re-election. You have to understand, Trump had no plan for vaccine distribution. The only reason Trump took COVID somewhat seriously is because he had the threat of re-election. Without the threat of re-election, Donald Trump would have let COVID go even worse than before. After this election, if Donald Trump wins, you don't even understand how bad this would have gotten.
I don't know. He wasn't trying to dupe people. I think it's just in his nature.
Election.
And it turned into something that became extremely corrosive as far as I'm concerned. And it undercut what little power I think progressives have in the Democratic Party.
So you agree that progressives had the power to hold up the vote?
Yeah, everybody had the power to hold up the vote.
So do you think that
you, my friend, are a follower, not a leader? Yeah, go kiss some Jimmy Dore ass, bud.
Do you also agree that they should have held up the vote in exchange for something more, whether it's committee appointments or full elimination of PAYGO?
I mean, I don't know if frankly, I don't know how if you could organize people around the idea that like this one person should get on a committee or not. I mean, I'm not in Congress.
What do you mean organize people around?
Well, I mean, you need to get 5 or 6 or whatever, 10 people to vote as a block.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not convinced that there could be something they could settle on that would work across, all of their agendas to do that, because it comes at some price. I mean, you say it doesn't, but the reason why AOC lost that vote for the Energy and Commerce Committee is because she was leading the charge to primary other sitting Democrats, and they don't like that.
And yet a woman who, I'm sorry, I forget her name, the moderate who ended up withholding the vote this time, ended up getting a seat on that.
She voted against Pelosi last time and lost a seat on the judiciary that she wanted.
Right.
This time around, it was reported by Politico before that she had been quiet about not voting for Pelosi.
Right. So there's
did Connor Lamb suffer any repercussions for not voting for Nancy Pelosi or any of the other, I believe, 5 members of the right side of the Democratic caucus?
Did they suffer any? I
don't know offhand.
I don't know either.
Yeah. So there's a lot of assumptions being made about why any of this happened. But what is assured, what we know for certain is that until 4 or 5 members of the Progressive Caucus, the squad, whatever you want to call it, agreed to vote for Nancy Pelosi, there's no way that Nancy Pelosi could become Speaker of the House.
I don't mean literally. I don't think they're literally going to take over the party in 5 years. I think they need to build a third party within the Democratic Party. Building a third party outside the Democratic Party doesn't matter. But what they're doing right now, building like a internal third party to get different compromises and everything, that is good. That's what they need to keep on doing. And I know progressives who win in red districts, by the way. It just so happens the kind that get more media attention are going to be the more really, really progressive people from the blue districts. But
and my main crucial point, and I think that what really can't be
I agree
ignored,
with
and
your
what really
point,
got
though.
lost in a lot of this
Progressives do need to win in more moderate districts, of course. Yeah, they need to prove that.
discourse, because people weren't arguing the merits of this in good faith. They were arguing about Jimmy Dore, and I think
The
there's a lot.
Patriot Party.
I think that I've been
You are
very clear.
entitled to your feelings about Jimmy Dore, but the
But-
reality is
but
there was a moment
Do
where
you
we
agree
could have.
that when I argue that I don't want to be part of this because he's using this as some type of litmus test, that is actually a good faith argument?
I think that's you're being honest about that. I don't think that reflects especially well.
You can
I
think
mean,
it's a dumb perspective on politics and whatnot,
I don't not believe you.
but do you think it's a good faith argument? Because you just said that is not a good faith argument, and I just want to be clear.
No, I think that people are not arguing in good faith about them. They're conflating. I think that what you said is true and honest, but that has nothing to do with the merits of good force the vote as a tactic.
Well, as a tactic, if it existed
I'm really glad you said that, Sam, because I think that's really honest of you to admit that your opposition is because Jimmy Dore is associated with it, and you don't think that Jimmy Dore is pushing it in good faith.
it's not just that Jimmy Dore is associated with it. It's as if like it's not like it's a car exists. And whether I get into that car is going
God, Sam Seder is making such bad points here. Stick to the substance. By the way, thank you, Spectre, for joining the support tier of the algorithm. But yeah, Sam Seder shouldn't be going into this Jimmy Dore stuff. You have enough points to make on the substance of it, on the polling, on the political reality of it. Like, why make it a personal thing about Dore? I understand the messaging issue, but dying on that hill, he should be bringing up. When you are talking about Dore, you should also bring up, here are the outside reasons outside of Dore why I don't support this, and then bring in Dore on top of it, because I feel like this is a really bad hill to die on for him.
to have something to
at this
do with who's
moment.
driving.
Right.
Rhetorically.
There are a lot
He
of
was
others
driving.
that
I'm
we're
sorry.
trying
He
to
was
do that.
driving. He was
That's
driving.
fine. Jimmy, a lot of why, Dan, a lot of why Jimmy was so focused, so central to it is frankly because people like you on your show spent countless hours
That's
clipping
not
his
true.
stuff,
That's Greek.
talking about
All
it.
that the
putting it
sequencing is wrong there.
Clipping, you don't got to
He
clip
was
it.
the only person who had his logo on the petition
I have a
for
question.
forcethevote.org. He's the first person still to
I
this
have a
day.
factual question here.
Until after the vote, the organization
Poor
came
Virgil.
out with the logo and all of that
No,
after the
Not
vote.
true. Not true. Not
If
true.
I could make a point of information, you've been referencing forcethevote.org. What is that? Because I mean, I know Force the Vote as a strategic proposal, as a tactical.
I'll bring up forcethevote.org. By the way, thank you for the $5 chicken fried Bryce. You feel bad for Sam. I mean, he's this was at like 10 o'clock last night, right? He's bringing that boomer energy right now. Rhetorically, he's getting kind of smashed right now just because like she's being so aggressive and she seems to be the person dominating this current point in the argument. The other areas he was definitely doing better though.
Disagreement. I also know that people are.
He seems a little tired.
in a Slack of some kind. But is there what
That's
is
not the
Force
same
Vote
Slack, by
about?
the way. I want to be clear. The Slack message that Ryan Graham was circulating was from, I think, a People's Party Slack. That's why I'm not a part of it. I'm not affiliated with the People's Party movement. The Force the Vote Slack is this random Slack that I've been tweeting out that it's got its own organizational structure. There's no leaders. They've just been trying to figure out what to do at this moment to try to fight for Medicare for all. Those are completely different Slacks.
So my point, my
Forcethevote.org
question then is: are we talking like are we talking about a strategy, or are we talking about something weightier, something more organized than that?
I mean, as a strategy in a vacuum, I was, again, supportive, maybe not necessarily for the ask, in particular ask, but the tactic itself, I was supportive of. When it became hijacked, if you want to say, or simply it was already being driven by that person, and it started, instead of traveling to a distance, it became something to hit pedestrians with, however you want to do this metaphor, I decided I don't want to be sitting in that car. And I think it became even more, and then people
Bring
were
up the other
attacked
reasons though.
for not wanting to sit and associate themselves with that. The tactic in a vacuum can be effective, but if it's being wielded in a certain way, I'm sorry. Like
it is important, but rhetorically, you should bring up the really focused points on why you don't want to make it seem like Jimmy Dore is the only reason you don't support Force the Vote. That's what I'm saying. You don't want to make people think if they see this part of the argument. You know, you don't want to make them think like, oh, I don't like Jimmy Dore's attitude. That's why I don't support it. You should bring up the other reasons as well, I think. I think you should always round back at where your main points lie.
That then as soon as it becomes a tactic as a way of establishing that and essentially, disempowering the most progressive wing in the Democratic Party, I'm not going to lend what little force me and my IKEA panels can add to it.
So why not take the reins, Sam? Because my approach to it was, you know, I saw the response that Jammie was getting. I think that there is frankly value in having a more aggressive approach exist in the world. I think that everyone can't be the reasonable person in the room. We need to have anarchists. We need to have people farther to the left.
Listen, I
exerting
have,
pressure and threat.
I have anarcho-communist on my show. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
But my argument, but wait a minute, Sam.
It has nothing to do with ideology.
So my response was to say, okay, if people don't like Jammie, let me write my own article and people can engage with the idea separately. And you know what all the responses to my article talked about? Jammie. And so I tried to show leadership. I tried to show how you could be interested in the idea without some of the bombast that Jammie was bringing to the equation. And I think that you, since you were the one who first even brought the idea to a lot of people's attention, could have taken leadership and said, I don't like what Jammie's saying, but here, I'm going to be the focal point. I'm going to be the spokesperson for this issue. And I think nobody would have had a problem with that.
I think, you know, like I say, the idea of forcing the vote on Medicare for all, it became a different, in my mind, the ask was not the best ask, but this thing had progressed. It wasn't my thing. I wasn't going to go in and try and like arrest.
If it's a good tactic, why not try to?
Because I agree. I'm sorry. I just wasn't interested in engaging in a fight with Jammie about what the ask should be for that. I think it's just.
You were, because you engaged constantly. You just engaged about
no. I was perfectly willing to step back and just let the thing grow. I mean, if I had brought you into it, then I felt like I had done enough as far as I'm concerned. And when it became clear to me that this thing was being wielded in a way that was going to be destructive, I didn't want a part of it. And when it became clear to me that it was a continuance of what I perceived to be Jammie Dore's, project, and then I struck back at Jammie Dore. I mean,
this feels like is the people who said, oh yeah, I guess I like Medicare for all, and I like a lot of what Bernie's saying, but supporters are just too aggressive and I can't get on board.
Well, yeah, but I wasn't one of those people, and that's not my point. My point is that I think Jammie Dore teaches people to be stupid. And I think Jammie Dore is out there. You know, I mean, if we're going to get into this, I just saw a video of him talking about the Boogaloo Boys without having done any research on it. No, but I think this is reprehensible, and I think this is really problematic.
True.
Okay?
This is true.
This is how because if my
Jammie did do this.
If this is perceived as being like inconsequential, I want to try and put it in context so I see it as more consequential. Okay, when there's a guy out there saying, hey, maybe we should embrace the Boogaloo Boys because this guy with a weapon is talking about taking out government in a civil war, but he also—
This guy with a weapon trying to take out government, that could be said about a million left-wing groups in the world.
Excuse me.
Oh my God. Jammie Dore made a video. We can watch it after, actually, saying the far right and the far left should come together to take down the government. And by the way, dude, we live in a very fascist country. If the government came down, we know which side it would fall on. But you have to imagine, if we agree with the right, the populist, far right, whatever, on something, and you're on the far left, why are they on the right and you're on the left? You have to look at the difference of why they might support a different form of politics than you do. Really look into it. It might be, you know what Nazvols are? You know what they are? They might agree with left-wingers on some stuff. You know what Nazis were? They might agree with left-wingers on some stuff. You have to look into it more. Why are they on the right? There's a reason they're not on the left.
This guy's a Boogaloo Boy. This guy's a
we all saw the video. You're not going to sit here on our show and misrepresent. I haven't seen the clip you're talking about, but I did see the Boogaloo Boy clip.
You should look at the clip. You should watch the clip.
So I don't want to talk about stuff that is not germane to this issue and is not being represented on the book.
You asked me why I didn't get involved, and I'm telling you.
That is fair. We are all very clear that you personally don't think that Jammie Dore is a worthwhile vessel for this. You think that it's worth throwing away.
I think he was using it in a destructive way, and that
Jammie Dore was using it in a destructive way, and it tainted it. So, what I'm saying, and I hear you. I think that everyone understands your point of view.
I think the argument that you're having with everybody about Jammie Dore is proof of my that he tainted it.
I'm trying desperately, can I tell you, to stop talking about Jammie Dore because 15 million people lost their health insurance this past year, and I can't get you to focus on that issue for more than 5 minutes.
Hey, no, because you want. Listen, I can focus on Medicare for all. But that's not the same as force the vote.
It is, Sam, because
no, it isn't.
It's not the same.
In your mind and maybe in some minds of others, but not in my mind.
The tactic that you just admitted was a good tactic, but for Jammie Dore, which could put us on a path.
I said the ask was not good, Brie. The ask. A losing vote for Medicare for all is not going to do what you think it's going to.
You just sat here and waxed philosophical about how important PAYGO is, and you're right. So why not ask to get rid of PAYGO entirely instead of these narrow exemptions for COVID and for the Green New Deal?
Because everything that passes in the next 2 years is going to deal with COVID, and Nancy Pelosi is done after this.
Oh my goodness.
Guys, I don't have an argument anymore. What should I say? I'm in a heated discussion and I ran out of arguments. I don't know what to say. Okay, Sam, I don't know what to say. People are dying, Sam. Come on. People are dying and you don't support my plan. Come on, Sam. Okay, good argument. Yep. Virtue signal. Wow, dude. It's literally the meme. I love it.
Brie, I have a question for you then. Sure. Is if force the vote is a tactical disagreement and not a plot by Jammie Dore? then would you accept that supporters of Medicare for All might simply have other ideas of how to get to that point that do not involve the specific tactic of withholding the vote?
And so we talked about this a lot, Virgil, and I think what a lot of people wanted to hear was what that is. So we, as you know, had Michael Lighty on the show, who was Bernie Sanders' healthcare
National
outreach director. Yeah, National Nurses has DSA affiliations as well. And he was very candid with us, and I really appreciated and respected his issue. And so my tempers really went up around this force of vote. Like, I got really invested when I asked the question, what's the alternative? And obviously he doesn't represent everybody, but we made a request for someone from the National Nurses Union to come on, and they declined. We have made all kinds of requests and people have declined. So Michael Lighty came on, and what he argued was that we have a 20-year-ish so window to Medicare for All, which involves state by state Medicare for All, principally starting with California, and that he believes that when Gavin Newsom makes a presidential bid, he is basically going to ride the wave of Medicare for All in California to the White House and make that a principal issue.
That's kind of dumb.
Now, reasonable minds can disagree on that. I personally don't find that to be an adequate plan, largely because it misses the opportunity that this historical moment of enormous cataclysmic healthcare failure in the United States of America and
the approval for private insurance, actually the approval for every form of healthcare went up during the pandemic. For private insurers, for public option, for single payer, for Obamacare, the approval rating for all of these things actually went up during the pandemic. So, you know how they are right now. People are scared of change. People are not for what she thinks they are for. Medicare for All may very well be a 10 to 20 year process. It might take that long. Throughout history, if you look at the biggest civil rights movements for women's rights, black rights, liberation, anything, these things took like 20, 40, 50, 60, maybe hundreds of years. Like, we're at the beginning of this getting super, super popular in America, surging off of 2016. It might be 2035 until Medicare for All is up to a serious vote that can win. It might be. But, you know, it's a fight you have to be there for. Progress is fighting through a storm your entire life. That's what it is. It might take that long. And are we going to just like not improve healthcare whatsoever during that time period? I don't think that's a good option, but I don't know.
In the middle of a global pandemic, which is likely to last 2 years, it misses the opportunity to leverage that to create the kind of political pressure on our elected officials so that it is toxic for someone like Joe Biden to say he would veto Medicare for All in the middle of a pandemic. It is toxic for only 118 Democrats to be co-signers of a bill when 88% of Democratic voters.
Nope, barely half support it as their number one policy. And this is why it's hard for me to listen to her arguments, is because I know they're founded on a misunderstanding of polling data. 88% of the party doesn't support single-payer healthcare. Barely half of the party supports it as their number one option. Around half of it supports a public option as well. So the distribution of co-sponsors in the House are actually pretty equal to the distribution of Democratic voters that want Medicare for All as their number one policy option. When you talk about all Americans, I think it's around like 35% to 40% that choose single payer as their number one option. It might be even lower, but
and a majority
we have such a big fight to beat this propaganda system from the corporate media, from corporate Democrats. It's going to be a long, hard fight. You need this progress to happen from the bottom. We are fighting big money. We're fighting the media. We're fighting Washington. We're fighting all of these already existing power structures.
Americans support Medicare for All. Right now, we have poll numbers, but it is not politically toxic to oppose Medicare for All because we have no one in the media institutions or in the political institutions who are willing to point out why it is that our elected officials don't support this popular policy. The reason being rank corruption and being bought out by the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. And that is an argument. It is very difficult to foreground, but which in this moment, in this historical moment, I think we should be fighting like the Dickens to put front and center.
But do you believe when the pandemic ends, that the logic for eliminating for-profit health insurance will also end?
No,
because the fight for Medicare for All obviously began.
It might increase after the pandemic.
It picked up momentum before the pandemic. It started pulling well before the pandemic. Shouldn't the fight still exist?
It stagnated during the pandemic.
I would add, Joe Biden said he would veto it during the pandemic.
Of course,
that's not to disagree. That's not to disagree.
No, I understand
with the point of that. Yes, this is a critical juncture, but that the fight obviously won't end.
So the point, and I'm really glad you asked that because we've talked so little about what these hearings could really look like. So part of the ask is for Medicare for All, because you can demand as part of your request the hearings on Medicare for All, and you can make requests about how long those hearings are, how many days they are, what the structure of them are. All of that is exclusively within Nancy Pelosi's purview. That's why this was such an interesting tactical pressure point, because Nancy Pelosi is invested in keeping the job. She's the one that's number one invested in that, as opposed to other things that she can't grant. Like, she can't make Biden push through a $15 minimum wage tomorrow. She only has what's in her procedural capacity, and structuring the hearings on the vote is in her power. So I went back and I looked at the Medicare for All hearings that they had in 2019, and I thought, why weren't these a bigger deal? How could these be better? How could we maximize, to Sam's point about how hard it is to get media attention, how can we make this better and have more of an impact than it did the last time we tried this?
All attention isn't good attention for something like Medicare for All. We just had an entire primary where the support barely even moved.
And one thing that I noticed was that there was absolutely zero conversation about corruption. They had all of these corporate moderate Dems and Republicans obviously as well, lined up with their experts and their witnesses to explain why we couldn't have Medicare for All. And not a single question asked.
But if they don't already support Medicare for All,
how much they took from the various industries who have an interest in maintaining our for-profit healthcare system.
But the politicians are popular. If Americans really voted on who is the most corrupt, things would be a lot different in America. It's not going to be some like big display where AOC walks up to the House floor, Nancy Pelosi, you are corrupt. And then the entire country is instantly for Medicare for All. That just simply isn't how it worked. Like, we got to this point in America. You have to understand, America got to this point of being owned by corporations and oligarchs for a reason. We're here for a reason. We didn't just... America wasn't made, I mean, it was made like this, but it wasn't just made in the current condition. We got here through a series of propagandizing, a series of political movements. We're here for a reason after the Reagan Revolution, for a reason. That stuff isn't non-existent. AOC coming up and just trying to create a big spectacle out of it isn't going to work as well as people think. Thank you for the $5, Ron. Biden never said he would veto M4A. He says if there's no way to pay for it, he'll veto M4A. I agree and disagree, because that pretty much says he's not for it, and he's trying to not say he's completely not for it. So he's going to say if we don't have the funding for it. So essentially, if pay-go requirements aren't met, is essentially what he said. But then we see the other money that's being spent, and we're like, okay, whatever. That doesn't seem to be your actual point. Thank you for the $10, Joe. Graham Elwood is saying that Biden should sign an executive order giving every American Medicare. I doubt this, but am I wrong? I don't know if he's actually saying that, but I do agree, like, if there was one vote they should have pushed for, they should have forced the vote on like pandemic Medicare for All. So like for the duration of the pandemic, any American can use Medicare services or something like that. I would have been for that. But the big issue is with the pandemic and people dying. It's not that people can't be seen by health insurance. The issue that we're going to see after the pandemic is people with medical debt. The big issue during the pandemic is that people with health insurance are either living in bad environments or there's not enough health capacity. There's not enough resources. There's not enough beds. There's not enough ventilators. There's not enough people power to actually care for people. If you are sick with COVID, you're probably going to get seen. If you already and this is a big systemic issue with how good hospitals are in certain areas, of course. Medicare for All, though, wouldn't fix what's happening right now. It would take 4 years to implement and even 4 more years to refine, to actually get everything done correctly. And that's with the most ambitious Medicare for All plans. Like, read the actual legislation. It would have extended Medicare down to people who are 50 and older or something in the first year, and then they keep going down. And then there's bills about rural hospitals, about urban hospitals. There's a bunch of different things that would need to take place. Medicare for All right now being passed during the pandemic would probably save no lives. It would be, after that it would actually save lives. Voting for Biden during the pandemic probably saves more lives than forcing a vote on Medicare for All.
As I watched, I went to Open Secrets and I Googled. Every time someone says something negative about Medicare for All, let me Google what their campaign donation profile is. And to a T, they were at the top of the donor list for private health insurance industry, the pharmaceutical industry. I think that now, as 15 million new Americans have just lost their health insurance, and everybody is really focused on how horrible that is when you're just trying to live your life and not die because you're forced to go to work because you're an essential worker and they run out of PPE and all of this stuff.
That's a different issue, though.
That they would no longer have the excuse that they used to rely on and what they relied on in 2019, which is that if you like your healthcare, you can keep it. We're in a unique historical moment where you cannot say people like their health insurance.
But people who lose their jobs are falling onto Medicaid,
which was the #1 defense all of these corporatists used during the 2019 hearing.
Or they're Republicans.
That's why I think this is a unique opportunity.
In red states.
I mean,
who don't want healthcare in general.
I think we're in a unique crisis. I'm not quite convinced that what you're saying will galvanize those things. I mean, I think, getting rid of Richie Neal who wouldn't allow people to even literally say the words Medicare for All at that hearing,
I agree.
would also be very effective.
And that was on my ask list.
And well, I mean literally getting him out of office. I mean, you're not going to take it. I mean,
sure.
it's just simply not going to happen that he's going to be removed from committee chair. I mean, again, like Nancy Pelosi could at one point just say, I'm going to call your bluff, and I'm willing to go in front of, I'm willing to allow the media as it is. I mean, like, look, I think you and I agree. The way that the MSNBC and CNN and ABC and Fox would, who knows how they would do it, but they would all just make it look like you have 5 or 10 Democrats who are being obstructionist. AOC has got higher name recognition amongst Republicans. They hate her as well, if not more so than she does even amongst Democrats. I don't think that the popular opinion would go in the way that you think it would. We have a disagreement about that. I should also say, in terms of like, we want to talk about if people want to learn more about Medicare for All, the Healthcare Now, Nurses United, the DSA, Our Revolution, a bunch of these organizations have a conference this weekend, actually. Yeah, you can go online and see it. I think some of the stuff might come out later. I'm not sure. But you can register for that. You can see these strategies. They're going to approach the states, and
everybody should. Everyone should.
Thank you for the 59 Swedish currency. I don't know what it's called. Sam has a winning move here. He could say the media. In the media debate, Pelosi can say she wants M4A with a public option. That would torpedo force the vote strat, or would it torpedo it? I don't know. I think that'd be a good thing to push for. Like, for example, if they would push for extending Medicare, not Medicare for all, but how about during the pandemic, or not even during the pandemic, in general, we force a vote on lowering the Medicare age to 45 or something like that. That might be a more effective strategy. Current Medicare would be received, like if the plan was Medicare for all, as current Medicare is, without expanding it, without including eye or dental, if it was as is, it would be better received by the American public. The single payer thing, eliminating private insurance, is what really holds people back. If the plan, and I'm surprised nobody really said this yet, this is what I think the healthcare system will eventually end up being. Literally take what Medicare is right now and expand it to everybody. Literally take Medicare right now without covering 100%, Medicare as is, expand it to everybody. I feel like that's going to be what our eventual universal system looks like. I don't know if we're ever going to get like Medicare for all as is, with 100% covered with everything, dental, surgeries, eye care, and also family practice. I don't think all that's, and orthopedics and all that stuff, and retirement. I don't think we're ever going to have that system. That is the ideal system, but pushing for that ideal, I think, is pragmatic because it pushes the compromise more left.
Watch that and weigh in.
Yes, and
no, Medicare to everybody isn't a single payer system. Medicare as is right now isn't single payer. If you're on Medicare, you can buy supplementary plans like Medicare Advantage or something, and that will be similar to the Australian multi-payer system of universal healthcare. That isn't the same as single payer like Canada has.
Part of this is. You got a lot of people who've been trying to push for this, single payer health insurance since Truman. And there are a lot of forces aligned. It's not just insurance. It's also like big hospitals and doctors to a certain extent too. And so, I think like from my perspective, the complete assuredness and the efficacy of this strategy, and the sense that anybody didn't sign on to this strategy is
no, that's not the force to vote argument. They're talking about a way to push the extreme in a really bad way. You can still push for the extreme without force to vote. Force to vote is a virtue signal. It's a strategy. It's not like the position you're vying for. It's saying we need to push for the extreme solution right now, 100%. If we're not violent with it, we're not going to be able to get it passed. We need to be revolutionary with it. We cannot be reformist with it, basically. We can't take our time whatsoever. We can't organize more. The organization is done. This is the right thing by principle. It doesn't matter if it makes pragmatic sense. That's what like Kyle Kalinske and Brianna Joy Gray say. It's by principle. Always act on principle. Even if it's not going to help people, act on principle all the time. Always do what is right to you morally. That's what their argument is. My argument is we should do what's best for change and what's going to help people's material conditions on our way to the eventual goal.
As
we get political power.
For all, I think was, I don't think that was helpful. And
I want to be clear that I have never been.
No, I'm not saying that you did that.
No, but you're talking to me. So look, if I could just say, I have
No,
never
it's
been.
not push or don't push. It's don't make a stupid decision. You don't go into a fight swinging for haymakers. You're going to get your ass kicked by anybody who actually knows how to fight. Regular corporate Democrats know how to fight. If progressives walk in like, guys, we're going to lead the revolution. Yeah, let's fight for Medicare for all. No matter what, let's just do this one force the vote thing. They're going to get freaking knocked out, dude. Principle and pragmatism. Like, there are different ways to fight, but it's not the same as not fighting. Discipline, if you show discipline in something, it doesn't mean you're not fighting. It means you're taking a better approach. You're taking your time to make sure your attack is the right attack. That's actually going to work.
I'm not sure about the strategy. I
What's
think
the point
a
of
lot
pushing
us
if
who
it's
are
to a
very
dead end?
actively debating this issue on the left in good faith, we're clear that we don't know what the outcome is going to be, but we have a different assessment than you, Sam, of what the political costs are going to be. And as Karl Rove has said, political goodwill is not something you can put in the bank and grow interest on. It's something that when you have it, you have to spend it. And we just have a disagreement about what this moment.
Hey, if you keep on strawmanning me, I'm going to ban you. I'm not even kidding. Wait 20 years and hope the problems fix themselves? No. I actually get outside and convince people for universal health care. Don't just yell at AOC, the most progressive member of our Congress in American history, and say she's not a real progressive. Yeah. Wait 20 years until the problems fix themselves. Yeah, okay. Stop. You're thinking like a 2-year-old, literally. Like, come on.
Moment demands and what the opportunities in this moment are. Can I ask you, Sam? I'm sorry, go ahead.
At least respond with like what I'm actually saying.
I think that's true. I mean, what the moment demands is, I think we're probably in agreement. But the strength of the tools that you want to use, I think we are.
Progress takes a long time. I want to ask you something.
When AOC was running, I remember her saying there was
even the civil rights movement, which peaked at in the 60s with all the riots and all the protesting. Even that took a long time to develop with inside and outside pressure. Like, these things take a long time to happen. Even if you think, these things happen in a day with extreme public pressure, the part of the revolution that's important, the part of the revolution that is really important, is the part that is not televised.
Interview she was doing with Justice Democrats, I believe, where she said she'd rather be a one-term congressperson and fight. I know that she fought tooth and nail.
Yeah, we don't have the
I'm paraphrasing, obviously, I'm sorry. But then to, make compromises. And,
not even in socialist. Oh, by the way, thank you for another 59 Swedish currency. Hey, by the way, if you ever want to talk about the Swedish system, you can call in whenever you want.
It feels like...
Yeah, even in Sweden, it's not covered by... dental and vision are not fully covered, like in Bernie's M4A. Yeah, no healthcare system in the world goes as far as Medicare for all does.
Make compromises. And, it feels like the argument that is being made in defense of the squad more broadly in this moment is that it's better for them to protect themselves. I'm not saying you said this, but a lot of folks were saying, oh gosh, they'll lose their seats. They're going to be completely disempowered, et cetera, if they do anything antagonistic to the Pelosi. Do you think that the way that she and the squad have behaved suggests that she no longer feels like it'd be worth it to shoot her shot and be a one-term congresswoman? Do you think that she's changed?
I hope that that's not her perspective, because like I say,
is she a careerist?
She was instrumental in getting rid of Eliot Engel.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very consequential. I think that he
did a lot of that too.
Huh?
Eliot Engel was instrumental in getting rid of Eliot Engel.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I think if there's no Justice Democrats, if there's no AOC, I think it's highly unlikely that that would have happened. And I think that frankly, the perspective that she would just force the vote and then leave Congress. I mean, if that's what you're suggesting.
Well, no, I think
that'd be so bad for progressivism. If AOC lost her political power, holy crap, dude, we'd be set back so far. She literally has so much ability in this political system to garner political power. Holy crap, there's nobody that has her appeal across so many demographics. Holy crap, dude. Jesus. She's literally like, if you're playing Pokemon, she's like your 90 overall Pokemon, fully evolved. She's that. She has the whatever necessary. By the way, I can always tell. You can tell I was a Bernie or Buster back in the day, like a year ago. And I was feeding into the Jimmy Dore and Kyle Kalinske crowd, because this is the person right here that said she is unsubscribing from me. And I could see publicly subscribed for 11 months. So it dates back to when I was making Bernie or Bust videos. I see this all the time. People come in my streams. They're so surprised that I'm not spewing the same stuff anymore. So they're like, oh, I need to unsubscribe now.
It's ridiculous, the idea that her seat was at all in jeopardy
No,
because
her
she
seat
did this.
was not in
I thought that was
jeopardy.
silly.
Her seat's not in jeopardy. What's in jeopardy is like, you know, like the upside for that. It's contingent upon a lot of things that you're talking about, you know, public opinion galvanizing around this vote and whatnot. And you and I have a different sense of what the costs are too. And I think, you know, I may have a wider berth for accepting that someone could you know, that idea is that someone else could perceive that idea is not as strong as I do. But I think that one of the things that you should always assess when you get into a fight
Back
is
in
your
the
chances
day,
of
a
winning.
year ago, yeah.
And in every fight that you lose, there are costs, and there can also be benefits in losing fights. And I think my sense of what was to be lost was greater than what was to be gained. And I suspect that was also, you know, the progressives' perspective. You don't think that the PAYGO exemption for the time being is relevant?
No,
Goodbye.
that's not what I said at all, Sam. That's not what I said.
Is as they could have gotten more.
Yes, they could have gotten more.
They could have gotten more.
It was incredibly important, which is why they should have gotten more.
Maybe. I think this is going to be sufficient for the next 2 years at least, because I think we're going to be, like you say, dealing with this pandemic for a long time, and just about everything in our society is impacted by it. But I want them to continue to amass power. I don't think they have much. I don't think the left has much. I don't think that people are going to galvanize around the things that you think that they are, based upon, you know, just the fact that Joe Biden beat out the candidate for Medicare for All in the Democratic primary.
But what do you take from that? What do you take from?
By the way, the reason Biden beat Bernie isn't really because of Medicare for All. If you look at like the #1 issues for voters, the #1 issue was, can you beat Donald Trump? And they saw Biden as the more electable candidate. Whoever voters saw as more electable is who they were going to elect. And you can say Medicare for All is the reason they thought Bernie was not electable for sure. But ideologically, the Democratic voter base does align with progressivism. The issue is progressives aren't pragmatic, and progressives don't show that they can win and actually get anything done. If progressives can't prove to Democratic voters that they can win and get stuff done, progressives aren't going to win. No matter how progressive the Democratic Party is, they're going to keep on electing people who seem to be more pragmatic. It's just how it is. You know, Biden seemed like the pragmatic choice to Democrats, although I disagreed the entire primary.
The fact that Joe Biden won? Do you think that's an indictment of Medicare for All as a problem?
What made me go away from Bernie or bust? I got into local organizing a little bit and spoke to people that have been doing this stuff for a long time and saw a couple generations. They changed my mind a little bit. And also, after that, I started searching up more sources on it. That actually is how I found like Vosh, his like more pragmatic stuff, and this new YouTube scene coming up of debate bros. Although I think it's kind of cringy, I still like watching people who have actual rebuttals to their points. You know, I'm sick of seeing people scream into echo chambers 24/7. I want outside opinions to come in, and I want to see them spar over their ideas, even if it is really, you know, performative a lot of times with everybody. But yeah, it's still a lot better. It's far above, in my opinion, than like a simple commentary channel where you're just talking into a camera, never having any rebuttals to your points, and you never have to respond to anything. And watching like the Kulinski stuff only makes you really weak at politics because you're used to only hearing, you know, an echo chamber. So if somebody from outside that echo chamber comes in, you don't really know how to rebut them. Or is it rebut? Is it rebut them? Rebut? I don't know. But, you know, offer a rebuttal. But yeah.
So what do you take from that? What do you take from the fact that Joe Biden won? Do you think that's an indictment of Medicare for All as a policy?
No, I don't think it's an indictment of Medicare for All, but I just don't think it motivates people as much as we would like it to.
Could it be that beating Trump was just a bigger priority than Medicare for All in the last election, and that it's actually not a referendum on people's preference for that policy?
I'm not saying it's a referendum on people's preference for that policy. I'm talking it is a measure as to what they are going, you know, how much they're willing to trade off for that. For instance, gun control. Gun control. It has enormous support, broadly speaking, but it's not people's first issue that they vote on.
Right, I agree. I think that what happened in the election was that beating Trump was people's #1 priority, and for a lot of reasons we can talk about, including the media, the perception was that Joe Biden was the only person who could beat Trump.
Yeah, that's true.
So, you know, I don't think that it's the fact that Biden won really says anything at all about the status of Medicare for All.
Well, Sam,
it does say that it's that it does say that people can find at least one.
Yes,
other
at least
thing that's
one.
more important.
I think that no longer exists.
Right, but maybe there could be others. I mean,
so
look, what was the pushback in the when
Oh my God, it was literally about getting Donald Trump out and being afraid of, before the 6th, by the way, it was getting Donald Trump's influence out of the White House, because they were still, by the way, the entire month before the 6th, trying to deny election results. That stuff came up, the economy came up. Just because it makes sense in your brain, like it is easy to think this, like, you know, pandemic, health crisis, best time to push for Medicare for all. But like, we shouldn't just go off of our own like intuitions. We should be looking into the actual data, because our own thoughts are going to deceive us many times. So look into the actual reality of it, look into what people are actually thinking, and all data isn't good data. You know, review multiple data sets, multiple methodologies, all that stuff. Talk to actual people on the ground, talk to regular voters in like Georgia, because that was going on and all that stuff, and actually get a pulse of the nation, not just what you think makes sense during that time. Because Americans right now with healthcare, 90% of Americans do have healthcare. There's a reason Medicaid isn't expanded. It's because not enough people benefit from something like Medicaid, or they don't think it's a good idea, or they don't want health insurance whatsoever. So there's a lot of different things to consider here.
When the Democrats passed the HEROES Act, what was the pushback to the COBRA subsidies? I mean, I talked about it for a long time, and I spoke to AOC about it. Actually, she came on my show and said that was horrible. It's garbage. And I can tell you, the response to that was crickets.
Yeah, there should have been. I know that Jimmy Dore is very vocal about that as well. So I think that there needs to be more coordination across the left media to drive the kind of enthusiasm which came very organically around Force the Vote.
Have that kind of strength. I got news for you. Like, this is honestly, it's like bald men arguing over a comb when we start talking about it.
I disagree. And I said this to Jimmy Dore as he was critical of me for not talking more about the failures of the CARES Act, and I think that that's right.
Not CARES. I'm talking the HEROES.
Sorry, the HEROES Act. The issue is
CARES Act was
in the spring. But I am personally talking about the CARES Act. But regardless, I think that part of the issue is, I know personally, I'm like constantly looking, you know, journalism is crap. I'm constantly looking to people like Sara and Dave Dayan and like the few outlets that are covering, you know, Stein at Washington Post, the few people who are covering what I need to know here or there. And then I try to amplify it to the best of my ability. But it feels like I'm just doing a one-woman kind of like impromptu comms task here. And it does feel like shouting into the void sometimes. And I think that there could be a lot more coordination to drive home certain messages. We're all talking about the same thing on the same day. We all get direct
push progressive policy and we win. That's simply like that isn't true throughout the nation. Like it just hasn't been true. I mean, yes, it has been true in some areas, but not enough. We win in plus 40 Democratic districts. We have like a couple progressives winning in moderate districts, but we need to be able to like win all over the country before we make grand statements like that. I do agree progressive policies are popular, but progressivism is really hard to sell to people. It still is a really complicated and hard thing to sell to people. I would run on progressivism. It depends where you are, what kind you're going to run on. But yeah, I do agree that things are popular, but the politicians and the culture of America is so antithetical to progress. It's really hard to weave through. And the current people doing it are doing a good job. Yeah, and we should use the people that, you know, when someone's strategy works, we should encourage them to do what they're doing on the inside and also adapt to those strategies on the outside.
Feeds from the reporters who are doing this stuff so we don't miss something. There's so much happening, something important doesn't fall through the cracks. And we talk about how to frame issues in a way that they're accessible and relatable to people. I think that even if you disagree with Jimmy Dore, we could have had a conversation even about how we could
I watched
reframe
people trying to have a conversation with Jimmy. I watched that. I saw that.
I was talking about you and I having a conversation, or whomever else it was.
I'm totally open to that. I'm totally open to that idea. And all of those reporters you talk about, I have a lot of respect for and do as much as I can to promote them. You know, I got the Sirota's on a list right now who we're going to book.
So if I could jump in.
Yeah, definitely. Medicaid, the floor for Medicaid needs to be heightened, of course. Yeah, so people who have jobs, the working poor can have health insurance, of course. Yeah, sure. I agree with that. Medicaid should be brought up and Medicare should be brought down. We can do it. We need to sell that first. If we can't even pass Medicaid expansion, how are we going to pass Medicare for all? Thank you for the $5, Ian. All right. Since AOC failed us, Brie must primary her to continue the fight for Medicare for all. Why hasn't Brie done this? Why is Brie standing between us and healthcare? Thank you. I agree.
Right here as the kind moderator. I think something you just said was very important.
I love it.
You're describing the salience of issues among voters. And we all saw Bernie lose the Democratic primary, even though most of the primary voters, when asked about the issues, agreed with him. And your notion is that, well, they simply felt that beating Trump was a more salient issue and that they perceived Biden as the better candidate. So with that in mind, if you want better electoral outcomes for one, then shouldn't the effort be to change which issues are most salient?
In terms of like what people what they perceive as being most salient?
Yeah.
I mean,
change perceptions, right?
Yeah, I think that is I think that's hard to do. I mean, like I've watched. I mean, look,
you don't have to tell Brie that.
That's why we're trying. That's why we're trying.
I know, but I'm saying that maybe if I want different outcomes for those issues, maybe there is other tactics that can be pursued. I mean, because and I think the way to get to that is through more through grassroots organizing, and I'm not a grassroots organizer. I do think that there needs to be, more organizational strength on the ground. But then I also do think that what you need to do is literally get to a critical mass of lawmakers who support these positions. And we're just simply not there yet. I mean,
right, but how do we get there? So I'm not a grassroots organizer. You're not a grassroots organizer. Us sitting on our platform saying we need more grassroots organizing is, I would argue, less effective than using our platforms for what media what we can do.
I think one of the ways you do that is.
Thank you for joining me for this stream. If you're not yet subscribed, please consider doing so and liking the stream as well. I'm sure I have a couple dislikes. I can't see that from the screen though, but I'm sure I do. And thank you for the 4 people watching on Twitch.
Frankly, you support organizations that are primarying Democrats. I think
all the new patrons
helpful. I think like what we're seeing out of Chuck Schumer right now is just out of a fear of a primary. I think what we've seen in New York, we got rid of the IDC because of primaries. I think primarying Democrats. I mean, I'm in favor of primarying Democrats, every single Democrat. And at one point it becomes like, do you want to deploy all your resources on something that's not going to be effective or someone who's not as high on the list? But I think that primaries are a huge mechanism. And in my mind, the best vehicle I've seen for primarying Democrats in over 20 years is the Justice Democrats. And this is a good example right here. Pop that up.
I wanted to talk about, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to ask you what you thought about this.
I absolutely agree. And I think the key, I think the misinterpretation of this is that sometimes it's also not. She wrote sometimes. And I think it's,
Can you appreciate how frustrating it was for folks? Because literally we were told, I understand you can say it's just conditional on the context, and that's a fair argument. That's completely fair. But there are people who made this argument for force of vote whom were told, no, you're just stupid. That's wrong. That's a bad tactic. If you don't win Medicare for all, then there's no point of it. There's no point in getting someone.
Well, I was saying because they don't understand the polling, and that's why it's a bad idea. I never strawmanned it to that point. I actually, if you watch my channel, I stayed away from the argument that like, this isn't going to get Medicare for all right now. There's no chance of it passing. I actually stayed away from that argument generally. I tried not to strawman it in that regard. I tried to stay on the polling, stay on the political pragmatism, and all that stuff.
Record, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, she's talking.
I actually hate this. I actually think it makes everyone look wrong.
You hate
the last sentence here. Sometimes we vote for the historical record to let future generations know we did everything we could, which is to say, what, nothing.
Well, that's what
they're. I agree. That's the weakest. That's the weakest reason to do it. That's the sort of self-satisfaction, and I think that's the most vacuous of reasons to do that. But really, what she's saying is, on some level, it's like one is to get a sense of where people stand on this. Now, in the context of Medicare for all, we do know where they stand. I mean, that's built into the thing, right? We want to get those. We can almost exactly know what the vote count would be on a Medicare for all vote. And then the second one is
not. I mean, to me, that was never my favorite part of the argument. I'm a comms person. I care about the comms piece. But I mean,
the second one here.
She's a comms person. Yeah, okay, bud. We'll see about that comms background. Yeah, comms. Okay, I believe you 100%. Yeah, comms. Okay. You know what she's good at? She is good at communicating when people tell her what to communicate. When she's working for a campaign and she has a list of stuff she has to talk about, great at comms. Not good at planning it, though.
She says, is sometimes these votes create real political pressure that forces developments. Now, sometimes they do, but she's talking about impeachment, and the impeachment vote is a big wedge issue for Republicans. I think she was talking about the impeachment vote.
Yeah, this is all about impeachment.
And I think it's going to create a bunch of wedge issues. In fact, I think McConnell, you can actually see what happened with McConnell. McConnell put out a trial balloon in the New York Times. And when the New York Times is reporting first on what McConnell's thinking, I think you get a good sense of what he's doing. He's trying to assess whether it makes sense for him to ditch, how much he can afford to ditch Donald Trump. And he found out he couldn't. And which is why there's been this sort of like dramatic shift. He found out after those 11 Republican congresspeople got nailed for voting for impeachment. And so I think this is one of those times where you're creating a wedge. but I don't think that the Medicare for all thing creates a wedge that is in any way helpful. Like I don't see how it's builds on it. I mean, we have a good sense. Look, if you think there's about a pool of 120 Democrats who would vote against Medicare for all, you and I could sit down in a couple of days and come up with a list of 40 that should be primaried. I mean, there are organizations that have assessed, like, what's the
well, if there are 120, then it would be a list of 120.
Well, but I mean, do we have the resources to challenge 120? I mean, that's the question.
I don't want to gotcha you, but how much of a wedge has impeachment been? Because I remember coming on your program at the beginning of last year, and we had it, or I think might have been the end of 2019. We had a conversation about impeachment, and you and I both supported impeachment because the guy's a fucking criminal. Even if it's not going to work, fine, whatever, just do it. It's the least bad option for this Congress to do, because obviously with Trump as president, McConnell as majority leader, it's not like you're going to do anything great right then. So you might as well expose criminality to the Republican Party. And you thought at the time that impeachment is going to be this wedge issue that's going to destroy Susan Collins in Maine. It's going to destroy these swing state senators. And we watched that happen in North Carolina, Maine.
I
these
agree.
like prime plum targets.
I agree.
Did not go that way. And it's. I mean, it is surprising. Honestly, considering the partisan lead, they did take the Senate.
They did take the Senate.
But considering the partisan lead of a state like Maine.
No, I agree. I agree. But I mean, look, it did not, it wasn't so much that it was going to be a wedge, that it was going to be, you were going to tie people to Donald Trump. You were going to tie these lawmakers to Donald Trump, and that was going to sink them. And
and if you tie people to being against Medicare for all, if you tie people to or against a certain policy, you need to make sure that policy has that solid support. But again, if your entire argument is predicated on the idea that Medicare for all is demanded by 90% of Democrats, of course you're going to think force the vote is a logical thing to do. Of course, dude. If I actually believed that 90% of Democrats wanted Medicare for all, I would agree that force the vote is the right option. If Democratic voters were really demanding it, I would 100% be for forcing the vote. That is the big issue they get wrong. They just don't understand the polling data. And that's why I did 10 videos on it.
It didn't hurt them.
Well,
it didn't hurt Burr. It didn't hurt Collins.
I agree. It should have hurt them. I think it was not the campaigns that were run against them wasn't effective, but the Democrats didn't end up taking the Senate. And I'm not convinced that it didn't hurt. I mean, I think like you had good candidates in Ossoff and Warnock, and they hit the corruption quite a bit. Impeachment in of itself was not enough, but I think I think the idea that they were so closely associated with Donald Trump did not help them. I mean, Donald Trump came down and campaigned. And it did not help them. So I don't think it was as effective as I thought it was, but they did end up taking the Senate. I mean, the goal was to take the Senate, and I thought that they would get more out of it.
Just talking about the Georgia races, they weren't talking about impeachment then. They were talking about $2,000 checks. They're talking about, elect us. McConnell's no longer the majority leader. Democrats are in charge. We're going to give you $2,000.
I don't think anything.
There you go. It's free real estate.
No, I agree. I don't think anything that was going to happen in January was going to be central, but it was like one more association with Donald Trump that they hewed themselves to him. And they both of them tried to do that, and it was not effective. It was barely. And I think to a certain extent, Susan Collins was allowed to sort of create distance between herself and Trump, which was, again, you have a tool, and if you have a hammer, and if you bang your head with the hammer, it's not going to help build. You're not going to help you build a house. You got to actually hit the nail on the head. But I think in this instance, again, it is forcing the Republicans to be with Donald Trump. And I don't know that I think some of them definitely do, but some of them don't want to be.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, again, it's hard to argue with, again, Trump won North Carolina, and he probably took Richard Burr with him. And Maine, that's kind of a different situation where Collins was, got enough Biden-Collins voters to get reelected. I mean, these are overdetermined things, elections, and, we can sit here and we can bullshit about what we think is going to be the case. But, the fact of the matter is, we don't really know, and fucking Nick Silver doesn't know. The voters don't even know.
I agree. I mean, that's sort of also my point with all of this, all of the force the vote stuff, is that these things are very, very hard to predict. And when these type of tactics require this level of specificity and of outcome and incumbent upon reactions of the entire population, I think it can be tricky.
Wait, Brie, before we take questions, I want to go to one more point of conversation.
I'm just asking them to start putting them in the Slack. We don't have to start.
Join the Discord. Yes. Discord is the best way, maybe. Nah, actually, email is the best way to get individual yeah, email maybe. I'll see that more, probably. I don't know. I don't get enough messages to really not see all of them. I don't know.
Answering.
I'll get to it eventually, within like a week probably.
Oh, okay. All
Just
right. All right.
start
All
writing
right.
them down.
As long as they're nice.
Within a couple
questions.
days,
As
maybe.
long as they're pleasant.
I don't know.
And send the unpleasant ones too.
School
Let's
starting,
get
you know.
some nice questions going. I have one
Question
question.
time.
It is kind of central to something that the two of you have been talking about, and it's obviously something that backs me as well. And I will just frame it in this way. Sam, as someone who has been a leftist radio host for the past 79 years, what do you view your job as? What do you view your obligations as, if anything?
No, I think that's I mean, they have changed with the platform I'm on. I mean, when I was on radio, reaching, you know, arguably any given time, you know, with the potential to reach literally millions, there I perceived it as different than one where it's, you know, a fraction of that. And for me, I like to amplify different sort of ideas and histories and understanding of and contexts, and I like to on some level educate people as to, like, you know, how things work, so they have a better understanding of things. I mean, I don't and I perceive that I'm arming people for engagement in this stuff with just a better understanding of it. And then I also, you know, they're within like the YouTube culture of the right for the most part. I go after those people because I feel like I have a set of tools that I can deploy and do that, and I've come increasingly over the past 5 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, to be sensitive of like what's happening on YouTube in terms of like young people.
So when you
By the way, if you become a member or a patron and you are in Discord, if you want to redeem your role or whatever, make sure you connect your Patreon or your YouTube account to your Discord, and you'll get it.
Yeah,
on there.
2005, I believe, with Air America. Was that 2004? Okay, so about when it started being acceptable to criticize the Iraq War and the War on Terror. About when that started to be okay in the name.
Yeah, I mean, it was still not acceptable at that time. Like, you know, we had to leave the studio with a bat. Literally, no, I'm not joking. We both had bats. I mean, there was still a significant amount of death threats, and you were alienated.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, and, you know, maybe this is like very good faith for me. You know, you've been at this game for a while, and you have tangoed with Nancy Pelosi in the past rhetorically. And I'm sure you remember when Nancy Pelosi, you know, when the Democrats won back the Senate, when they were not expected to, in 2006. They won back the House.
Won back the House. They didn't win back the Senate until 08.
No, that's false. They won back in 2006.
The House in 06.
No, the Senate no, in 2006, they won back the Senate. They had 51 votes in the U.S. Senate. They won it with Jim Webb and
Tester?
Yes, and Tester, and a few others. I promise you that's the
Democrats gained 6 Senate seats by defeating Republican senators in the states of Missouri, Montana, Ohio, and page is still loading.
Rhode Island was another one.
Okay, 2006.
Yeah.
And they had the House and
So this is all questions now. This is all questions. Okay. If anybody here is pro forcing the vote, I'll take call-ins from you, Oni debates today. And if anybody wants to call in to talk in general, I'll probably do a call-in stream like tomorrow night or something.
Brie became majority leader in 2007, and Pelosi became Speaker of the House. Okay. And it was then that the left wanted the Congress to revoke the funding for the Iraq War, to stop the war. That, you know, this is what we've been fighting for the past 4 years now, and we elected the House, you know, and this came with a lot of left energy, and a lot of people had soured on the war, so defund the war. And then another demand was impeach Bush. Yeah. And neither of these things happened. Neither of these things happened. It was within Nancy Pelosi's purview as the Speaker of the House, and the House is supposed to, that's the people's house. It's fundamental to our constitutional system that the president just can't wage war. That has to be paid for by the House of Representatives. And so defunding the war, like just refusing to pay for it, not even voting against it, just refusing to pay for it, would be enough to stop the war. And they didn't do it.
Correct.
And they didn't do it. So I just, you know, just reaching back to that history.
Well, let me
if you see any parallels to today.
I don't know about parallels per se. You know, like there wasn't, you know, what happened in 06 was the war was what was driving a lot of activist energy. I think ultimately what won the House at that time was corruption. Mm-hmm. This guy who was involved in a scandal where he was basically preying upon his interns. It's Capitol Hill pages, and there was cover up from it. And you had like the number 2. I remember his name, but the guy from Buffalo. Yeah, I mean it was extensive. But the worst was the big one that hit in the fall was this Mark Foley scandal.
Foley scandal, yeah.
And
the idea that Jimmy Dore is like far left or something is kind of weird. He's more radical. He's more of like a he's more of a reactionary, but he's not more left.
I mean, I can tell you, I moderated a panel with Conyers and with Elizabeth Holtzman and I think it was Lewis Lapham at the town hall, and Conyers had a book like this of what you would impeach George Bush for. And I mean, people should not misunderstand. I've been saying for probably close to a year, particularly around when Pelosi first announced the PAYGO thing, which I think was in the fall of 2019, that I had come around to basically the position of I would rather someone whose ideology, I would rather Tim Ryan.
Mr. Zombie Killer 23, thank you for the tier 2 membership. Welcome to the YouTube Al Gore fan club, Al-Gore-ithm.
Be Speaker of the House, because then it puts progressives in direct oppositional. I mean, like even from the conventional wisdom, like I don't think Nancy Pelosi is a progressive, but she has these sort of bona fides because she's from San Francisco.
Yeah. And she was one of the co-founders of the conventional progressive. In both worlds. I
can understand why half a dozen members of the House don't want to simply be responsible for not, for Nancy Pelosi not being elected or for being obstructionist to that happen. But if I had my druthers, I would rather see Tim Ryan and just be in opposition to who the speaker is, be perceived as directly oppositional to them ideologically.
Okay, force the vote wasn't a bad idea based on if I had the same mindset as Brianna Joy Gray, I would agree with force the vote. If I believed everything about the world, I understand why she is saying force the vote. Logically, in her head, it does make pragmatic sense. To her, I understand that. But the issue is she is unable, and you could say that for anybody's beliefs, of course. They make sense in their own heads. But the issue is she is unable to grasp the reality of where things are. That's the issue. I think her, anger and intensity is genuine. But I think the entire Twitter base of old political comms people who are now big Patreon pals, making $30,000 a month on Patreon. I think they're all grifting a little bit. Come on, dude, you make $35,000 a month on Patreon, and this is your setup. This is your media setup. I don't even. That's wild.
But I think it's easy to make assumptions about how things are going to turn out and not know the cost that different members of the caucus perceive. But that's what I would have done.
Brie, you made this comment?
So I did editorial cartoons for the Crimson when I was a kid. And this was a cartoon that I did around the Foley scandal.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I should probably take these down because they did not age well all over.
By the way, what we're doing right now is pretty much just political hobbyism. This is important to make sure we get down our pragmatic strategies for how we're presenting these issues. But watching this and their conversation here is really just online political hobbyism. If this was serious, it would be, actual activists arguing over this, actual people on the ground, people who have been a part of this movement for 20, 30, 40 years or something. This is all hobbyism. And obviously this is more substantive than most hobbyist channels would be. But what we do here is pragmatic hobbyism, if that makes sense. We got to make sure we're not thinking we're doing real politics online. I hate when people say that. We're not doing real politics online. You can take things you learn online and translate that to real politics. This is this is like politics class, thinking about different ways to harness our abilities to bring out into the field when we go into real politics. So it does serve a role, of course. But yeah, we need to make sure we identify it for what it is.
So interesting that it's about Facebook. The one thing that.
Oh, and that's when Facebook was just at Harvard, right?
By that time, I think it had broadened out because there's another cartoon I saw as I was scrolling through just now.
Metapolitics.
Where it was a joke about how everyone can get on Facebook now, which is not very.
Yeah, we're making our arguments better.
To use the word of the day.
I remember this moment that defines the 2006 win for me. There was a congressman, he was the number 3, I think, in the Republican caucus, maybe the number 2. And he was from, I think, Buffalo. Maybe it was the 29th district in New York. I can't remember his name. And he had a press conference, and they wanted, and as this Foley scandal was breaking.
Destiny took his online influence and translated it to real politics. That's what he said. He said what he does online isn't real politics, and he wanted to do something in real politics and actually organize people. So yeah, I mean, you're reinforcing what I just said.
It became clear that the leadership knew about Foley. He held a press conference and brought 25 children with him that were children of his staffers.
What?
And he lined them up in the press conference with him. And one of the reporters said, "Did you bring all those kids in here so that we can't ask you questions about what Foley did?" He goes, "What are you talking about?" and that, it was stunning. And you know, I wish, I don't know if people voted for a Democratic Congress because they wanted to defund the war. I like to think that they did, but I also think that corruption, more often than not, is what is a theme that ends up,
Sure,
like,
there was corruption. They also ran on healthcare that year in 2006. I mean, it depends who you ask. If you ask Rahm Emanuel, he's going to say, well, it's because because he was in charge of D-Trip then. He's going to say, well, it's because I recruited all these veterans and people like veterans and all of that shit. I mean, we all remember the wackiness of that time. The fact of the matter is they won. That was also the year, I remember very well that they took back the Senate, because that's when Rick Santorum went down, 2006. That's when Lincoln Chafee went down, 2006.
It's definitely a Santorum cartoon.
That's when I just want to see more of
Santorum, 2006. God, man,
Yeah.
I feel
I
old.
hate Rick
Yeah, Jim-
Santorum.
Jim
Holy
Webb,
crap,
he-
dude.
I remember
Rick
Webb.
Allen,
Yes.
2006.
Thank you,
That's
Nighthawk,
the
for
year,
spreading
We all
that.
thought Jim Webb was the guy,
That was a talent going down in Missouri, beat by Claire McCaskill.
Yep.
That's when Lieberman got reelected, even after losing.
even
by
after Lamont. Yes.
wow, this is all coming back to me too. Oh my God. I just want to see more Brie cartoons.
Lamont announced his candidacy on radio with me.
Really? I didn't know that.
I was filling in for Randy Rhodes. So I got him on because she had a very big audience, and he came on, and it was a Friday. He made the official announcement on Monday, but he said on Friday that he was going to run against Lieberman. I was not a fan of
The reason why I bring up this history, and the reason why I asked this question about left media, is because right now it really does feel, because there's not a left movement.
All right, I'm gonna find Rick Santorum's ranch. No, I don't remember that. I'm gonna find the one clip that was really bad from her. Michael. Yeah, Larry King, rest in peace. This was pretty gross. Here.
And Richard Wolff were for it. Universe folks were against FTV, but several Michael Brooks guests, like Cornel West and Richard Wolff, were for it. Where do you think Michael would have landed? I can't say. I don't even know if I don't even know if it's appropriate to even make an assumption. I mean, I think, I think Michael had, I don't know. I think he would have probably been inclined to be supportive, but I think also I know that Michael had a similar issue that I do with Jimmy, and I think that he would have seen that as being unhelpful. But I don't know.
I think he would have started off against it and then been persuaded for the reasons that you say. Like, I think that he would have started off distrustful of it because of Jimmy. And because I had several people like this in my life who didn't like it, but then liked it after they read my article.
Oh my God, what a big ego. Holy shit, dude. What the hell? I know many people in my life that didn't agree with it, but after they read my article, then they agreed with, oh my God, dude. Freaking his dead friend, old co-host, he says, I don't think it's appropriate for me to even say. She comes out with the audacity to be like, yeah, I think, I know a lot of people that after they heard my take on it, they disagreed at first after hearing Jimmy, but after hearing me, they realized this was right. Seriously, dude.
And then I think throughout, he would have tried to distance from Jimmy and been very critical of Jimmy. But I also think that Michael had this, we often agreed about the dumb left stuff. He thought that voting third party was dumb. He thought that all of that, anything kind of withholding your vote was dumb. He didn't like those sorts of things. God, and this feels like that. It has that same kind of strategic valence. So it could go the other way. I thought about it a lot, and I'm not.
God, why would she say that, dude? The end was better, obviously. But saying I don't know. Maybe it's just a difference in how we're yeah, maybe she has some issues with that. Wild. Please consider hitting that subscribe button, of course. And all that stuff. Where did I put this at?
I don't think
there's not a left party. There's not a real labor movement in this country.
This is the same person who said commonly your mom would be alive if she had M4A. Wait, did Brianna Joy Gray say that? Earlier she said, what's the thing she said about, yeah, if Jimmy Dore killed 15 Sam spoke over her and she's like, I need to get this point out. She's like, if Jimmy Dore killed 15 kids, I would still support Medicare for all. Like, okay, Good argument. I think. I believe you.
Fucking destroyed for the past 50 years. And not like we have in other countries. And, you know, Brie and I, we just recorded an episode with Bhaskar Sankara and David Duwali and John KB from the Antifada, where we talked about these very issues. And right now, the left is largely constituted. I mean, it's not very big. It's not on television. It's not in the New York Times. It's largely a subcultural thing. The audience, I mean, we can haggle over how big the audience is. We can point to how many small donations Bernie Sanders got and how many fundraising records he broke in terms of small donations. But you know, he broke all of them. Yeah, but you know, nevertheless, it's not you know, it's not a structural thing. It's not a big thing. It's not part of the background of the structure of our political system. And that means that right now the left, you know, generally, as people perceive it, is a mixture of elected officials who take on the status of celebrities, AOC, Cori Bush, Bernie Sanders, obviously, and small batch media hosts like us three. And that's not, you know, that's not sufficient. And my position has always been that, and this is why I try my best to never put my finger down on the scale on tactical disagreements or things like that, even though I do, you know, have opinions that I want to express. I don't think that it's generally fair for someone like Sam Seder or Jimmy Dore or Brianna Gray or Virgil Taxis, whoever else, to have for their opinion, have a greater weight than anyone else involved in what is supposed to be an egalitarian movement.
I mean, that is, like I say, my perspective on this was when I felt like the ask was the wrong ask. My response to that, to my coming to that conclusion, was to say nothing.
Guys, big news. Real big news. Oh my goodness. Huge news. Oh my. Huge news. Where is it? We're beating Nico House. We're beating Nico House. Applaud. Applaud. Applaud yourselves. Beautiful. Yeah, cool. Probably not for long. I'm guessing it's going to be beating Nico House. Oh yeah. Peak. This is peak.
And it wasn't, I didn't engage in it. I mean, I gave it some amplification, as Brie said, that's where she heard about it. I gave it some amplification, and it wasn't until I felt like Jimmy was doing something destructive. And even then I was more about, like, you know, I wasn't even commenting on the car. I was just saying, like, I was commenting on the driver. And when I did, you know, engage in watching, like, when Sirota tried to say we should have different asks, or when I can't remember what it was, Ben tried to say that we should have different asks, or when Stoller was trying to say we should have different asks, and you know, those were train wrecks. And so
that's true, I agree. But Ben, Stoller, Sirota, Jimmy, and I are all on the same side of this issue.
I mean, the nuance was
if somebody donates 1 penny through chat, I'll bring on Cat Cam. I want 1 penny.
Was destroyed, and that's fine. I mean, I haven't
argued with Jimmy, and I'm sure have complaints about Jimmy. And I don't think that he behaved well toward them in all those instances.
Well, it's not so much that he behaved well to it. It's that it was quite clear to me, walking away from watching that as a viewer, that what he was doing was, in my opinion, more destructive. And
that's fine, but I'm just saying that the subject of all of that ire, all of the people who got shouted down, I'm not saying it was right that they got it shouted down, but despite all of that, they didn't throw out cars just because there was a bad driver. They still like the car. They just want to take the wheel.
We had a disagreement about you know, how dangerous a car can be in the hands of the wrong person. And
right, but they just took the wheel. They just decided to not let Jimmy drive it and make their own arguments, and they supported the argument.
They're better people than I am. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, this was my assessment. I have, you know, I am aware of Jimmy, and I think he's, you know, I think, like, and like I say, I was willing to ignore that initially, and then it just became impossible for me to ignore. I felt implicated in it, and I didn't want any part of that. And so that's how I acted on that. I mean, for the most part, I mean, look, you know, to your point, Virgil, I don't do a show where I don't take phone calls. I don't do a show where I don't, you know, where questions are sent. But my point is that, like, I try and platform as many people as I can. You know, I don't, you know, and I don't really care about doing that with people on the right, to be honest with you. I'm not going to pretend like I do that because I don't, you know, I'll bring on libertarians.
Frauds and imbeciles.
Huh?
These are frauds and imbeciles.
Right. I'll bring on some frauds and some imbeciles, but it'll be mainly to indicate that they're frauds and imbeciles.
Yeah.
But you know,
like, they stumble onto there.
I think your point about where the left is well taken. Now, I happen to think that there's actually more of a left now than there was 15 years ago, and I think our society broadly has. I think a lot of that is generational, and I'm you know,
shit, $2, Cat Cam. I'll be back.
I try to not be satisfied with that, you know, both to have some perspective on it, but also let it, you know, be perceive it as insufficient because the times demand more. I mean, we're in many respects in worse situations than we were even 15 years ago. Yeah. And I think building upon what we have is crucial. And I think that that when I see something that I think is inhibiting the building of that project, if we had 50 more Cori Bushes or Jabal Bowman's or AOC's in Congress, things would be very, very different. And like, I think that what, the Jayapal is doing with the Progressive Caucus is relevant. I think it's important. I mean, before it's been just like you pay $4,000 and you get the branding, and they are trying to restructure that so that you can get smaller group of people, but who are more cohesive. And, I support that project, and, I don't want it undercut because, someone has a theory that I think is, arguably dubious.
So my perspective is that to build on what we have already, we have to make sure that 20 years from now, or whenever it is that we finally have whatever the quotient of progressives there need to be for us to start making any kind of basic demands to catch us up with the rest of the developed world, the original progressives are still progressive, and not like Nancy Pelosi, who was widely perceived to be a genuine progressive 30 years ago when she was championing Medicare for all, and she was asking why we didn't have a floor vote. And to keep people honest, it's not about individually deciding to be corrupt, but there is a real thing called institutional creep that people have been studying for generations. And when you have power, what ends up happening is you think, wow, I have the ability to deliver for my constituents this thing tomorrow. And that is real. And those are real people who need a real thing. And you are constantly negotiating the trade-off between, do I hold out for this thing that may or may not come down the line, or do I settle and deliver this real tangible benefit from the people who are looking me at my face in my district every day? And the reason that I disagree with Doer's approach is because I think it's important to point out that it's not about individually decide to sell out, which is what people can take away from calling someone a sellout, and more about the institutional creep that I just described. But
and that dilemma that you just outlined too.
Dilemma, which is just legitimate. But what I do think is useful about Doer's framing and the energy that he's bringing to this is that constructively, if you are behaving the same way as a person who did literally sell out, because you are waiting whether or not to take a risk or not take a risk in a way that leads you to the same outcome every single time, then at a certain point, does it matter what's going on in your heart or your head? Like, I think it does matter to people because we like AOC. I like AOC. I've interviewed AOC many times. I think that she has, interpersonally, I'm inspired by her. I think a lot of us feel strongly positively about AOC. But I also think it's fair to want to hold her feet to the fire.
I agree.
And if I think there's room for Jimmy Dore, I think there's room for Kyle Kalinske. Who's like, hey, I'm the guy who started the organization that got you elected, and we didn't intend for you to take this kind of lackadaisical approach. The whole point of Justice Democrats was to have someone who was oppositional, who was willing to burn out and be a one-term congressperson if it meant putting these ideas on the map. I think it's fair to have someone who's more like me.
Oh my god, dude. They literally are more interested in making a point than actually making progress. Like, yes, let's take our most powerful and most popular politician and throw away all of her political capital in the name of being principled. Because an online commentator, I guess, I don't even know. Wild. I care more about progress, personally. Thank you for the $5. BAO derp. BAO derp. I don't know. But now Vash's cat is bigger. Vash's cat, Artemy, would beat up this cat. This cat's name is Odyssey. Thank you for the $5. Cat cam should be permanent. Maybe. I don't know. He sleeps a lot, I don't know if this is appropriate. This is like a PG-18. This isn't appropriate for children. Look at this cat licking himself. Wild.
I think there's to have someone to have more like Tim Black's approach, and on and on and on until you get someone, some folks who are saying, hey, I like you, AOC, but I'm going to push you gently. But someone has to make you afraid. And that's where the Tea Party on the right, I think, gets it a little bit more right. There have to be people who they know are going to embarrass them a little bit to get them to, and you can disagree about this particular tactical moment. I'm not talking about that. But I think generally speaking, the left isn't willing to do anything that would quote unquote hurt the people that we have elected, including Joe Biden, which is why we're not seeing elected representatives even in the squad saying things like, why isn't Joe Biden delivering on Medicare for all? Why, or things he can do by himself, like student debt cancellation. They'll say, I want to cancel student debt.
They literally are doing that. They've been doing this the past week. Has she been paying attention to their political pressure they're putting on him through the media cycles and everything? Like, they're literally doing what she's saying they're not doing.
But they won't say Joe Biden could do this and he won't put the pressure on him, right? And so that's the kind of adversarial attitude people are wanting more. That's my main complaint.
I agree. I mean, I agree in terms of your broad point, and I just think that I think that it is and it's situational, and I think I don't make an assessment of what's in AOC's heart. I don't.
It has been 3 days. That is true.
I don't really care. Like what about politicians, like if they're nice or not nice, or if they're sincere or not sincere. Like I perceive them as tools, as instruments. And but there are times where it's like I say, I'm not going to use my phone. I could hammer in a nail with this, but I'm going to break it. And I'm not saying that this would necessarily break AOC, but I'm saying that there is a calculation at times where it's like, is using this tool to do this worth it in terms of the outcome. And in this situation,
that would have been broken. What do you imagine? I mean that sincerely, like in good faith. What do you imagine the negative consequences for AOC and the squad? I want to broaden it because it's not all on AOC. I don't think it's fair to put it all on AOC. But what do you think the negative consequences would have been?
Well, I think there were negative consequences by the way that this was handled.
No. If they had gone ahead and said, yes, let's force the vote, everyone's
from
on
their perspective,
Yeah.
like what I mean, I
drawback?
don't have a full sense of from their perspective what they would perceive the cost to be if they. But also don't just make it just about force the vote, because I think there are some things that I would argue. I mean, personally, for me, like I would like them to have to get rid of Nancy Pelosi.
Me
And
too.
That's a different strategy though than force the vote,
No,
right?
I always argued it in the alternative. I always said in the alternative. Like, to me, I wanted them to make so many demands that were so big that frankly they would be forced to say no. That would then spotlight how useful the demands are at the same time.
Do you know how dumb they would look if the progressives walked up and said, Pelosi, you must do Medicare for all, Green New Deal, eliminate pay-go, give us all the speakership or whatever, committee positions. Like, there comes to political capital is real. You can't literally just like demand everything. And that's not because you're not allowed to like ask for more power, but you only have a certain amount of power to access. And they don't have money. Like I said, their only power is in people. If the people aren't on their side yet, what power do they have? And AOC's power, she's trying to gain, you know, a really common relationship with the regular Democratic voters, not fringe Democratic voters, but real Democratic voters in the suburbs, in rural areas, and in well, not rural, my bad, but in suburbs and in urban areas. Rural is gonna have to take some time for everybody, but suburbs and in urban areas, those are the two Democratic strongholds that she is really good at getting.
Time is giving them an excuse to vote out Nancy.
Dude, Pelosi would have beat them down, dude. Holy crap. She's so much more popular than, like, as a party leader than AOC is. She is a leader of the party. Like, that is something we can't ignore.
Pelosi. That was always my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, you know, but I think that from their perspective, you know, I think AOC paid a price in leading the charges to primary people. That's
So
why
she have primary
Yeah,
people?
she did.
Huh?
Do you think that she shouldn't have primary people?
No, I think
Or
she should have.
encourage primaries?
No, I think she should have. I mean, I think for me, from my perspective, it is because this is more long term. I want more progressives.
Primarying people is a good thing. That is different from holding up a vote for Pelosi. People don't, and by the way, AOC's endorsements are more powerful the more people she's popular with. So if she endorses a progressive who's running against a moderate Democrat, that progressive has a better chance of winning if AOC doesn't do things like force the vote, because she'll be more popular with more Democratic base, with more demographics
In Congress. And I'm not convinced that I don't think that her seat on the Energy and Commerce Committee, even though that would be super valuable, would be worth trading, you know, 2 or 3 other seats that she's probably responsible for. And those 2 or 3 seats could translate into 5 or 6 next cycle.
You know what's funny to me about this seat stuff, by the way? And I would ask your opinion on this as, you know, a professional, a political professional. Why is it like we all kind of accept that doing something?
Inspector, force the vote. Don't worry, it'll be gone soon. Don't worry, it'll be gone. This is the final one. They said it right here. Wait, where is it? Putting force the vote to bed with Sam Seder.
To like rock the queen, to upset Queen Pelosi can result in these really kind of accept. And I would ask your opinion on this as, you know, a professional, a political professional. Why is it like we all kind of accept that doing something to like rock the queen, to upset Queen Pelosi can result in these really punitive outcomes, right? So that we all kind of accept that Nancy Pelosi is giving appointments out based on who pleases her as opposed to who would be best, who would in the position or help the Democratic Party.
That's
Why
how
is it
life
that we,
works,
as
bud.
media figures, reframe that to
All of life involves connections and some type of political power or monetary power. That is literally every part of life. Like, come on, dude. Even online content creation. Like, me knowing people would help me. If I was doing collabs with people, I'd be growing faster. If you are coming out of college, you know people, you're going to get a job more. If you're friends with Pelosi, or if you have the same money ties, you're going to get a job from Pelosi. If you don't have something to offer her or more power to outpower her power, you know, there's nothing you can do in that scenario. That's life, dude. We need to be able to, you know, deal with the reality of it and fight and win. We need to win this fight, not just complain that the fight is there.
so that there's a political cost for Nancy Pelosi basically choosing to hurt some of the most popular members in Congress over like some.
No, Jimmy Dore is a reactionary. He's basically a Fox News host. He really is. He's a right-wing person. He has some left-wing economic ideals, but other than that, he's a reactionary. He is. He's a radical. He wouldn't be a leftist at any point in history. He's not valuable whatsoever. I don't agree with Jimmy Dore whatsoever. There's no real demographic of voters that can be gained by Jimmy Dore's tactics. He's useless to me. People who like Jimmy Dore are already radicalized to the point where they're not even available to work like normal people in politics anymore. People that are like, you know, obsessed with him. I'm not saying if you like him, that's different. If you're a casual viewer, but people obsessed with him, it's hard to, you know, I would choose 500. No, I would choose 20 Pete Buttigieg and Kamala Harris supporters over 500 ardent Jimmy Dore fans to work on a campaign, because they're going to torpedo me no matter what part of the country I'm in. Literally every part of the country rejects what Jimmy Dore brings to the table. Other than right-wing places that are so far right, progressives aren't winning there. And he's not even trying to sell progressive ideas when he's on Fox News. He's talking about Assange and talking about how shitty Pelosi is. It's an echo chamber. Greenwald brings him and Glenn Greenwald on, or not Greenwald, shit. Tucker brings Glenn Greenwald and Jimmy Dore on to make the left look bad, so they can all have a little echo chamber shitting on Democrats, shitting on Liberals Party. Because Tucker's not dumb. He knows that Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald are dumb, so he uses those two people as useful idiots. That's how it's all set. Freaking Tucker doesn't bring them on because he likes them. Tucker doesn't bring them on for any reason other than he knows it's politically expedient for the right to elevate people like Jimmy Dore, because he fractures the left and can't operate in real politics. He doesn't give a shit about political power or anything, dude. Like, come on. If he shows pushing for Assange to be pardoned isn't going to get any progressivism done in America. Literally, I'm saying he doesn't go on to push progressive ideas. He's anti-liberal. He's not progressive. He's anti-liberal. If you're anti-liberal, you're going to be pro, like, pardoning Assange. That's what the far left and far right agrees on. That's why Jimmy Dore talks about the Boogaloo Boys all the time. He thinks there's some type of utopia. He makes the biggest mistake that freaking people on the left have made all throughout history, thinking the far right populists are ever going to work with them. When in reality, they're never going to work with them. The far right is going to be the reason people on the left keep on dying. If they were really worth working with, they would be on the left already. They wouldn't be on the far right. It's not like there's people on the right who are like, yeah, I agree with you on Medicare for all, on the Green New Deal. I agree with you on a trans rights, and I agree with you on gay rights, and I agree with you on BLM, and I agree with you on police brutality, and the government's bad, but, you know, I just don't agree with you on abortion. Those people do not exist. That is fairy tale stuff. I'm dealing in the world of real politics. There's no utopia of all of us coming together singing like, we hate the government, we're gonna bring it down, F Pelosi, yeah, F the establishment, let's go, brethren, Nazis, get over here, socialists, get over here, we're gonna take down the liberals, yeah! That always ends in freaking death.
Stupid peccadillo.
I mean, I've certainly attempted to do that in terms of the fact that she controlled all the subpoena power of all the committees in a way that was unprecedented and prevented people from investigating Donald Trump. I did that in terms of like when she, I don't know that I ever stopped, but the first, people forget that they unveiled.
Wait, you hate government too? Wow, we're friends now. Wait, what do you believe about black people? Oh, you know what? I could look past that. You also hate the government. I don't care about your views on race or gender equality or any of that stuff. Yeah, you don't want to kill... Yeah. I'm tired. What is your political ideology? My political ideology is hating Nancy Pelosi, actually. Yeah, imagine if the far left and the far right seized the government somehow. Like, holy crap, the entire military and police state is far right, like extreme far right. They had to literally remove people from Biden's inauguration security because they were tied to Nazi groups, literally.
HR won when they won in 2018, and they stepped all over it by attacking Ilhan Omar. And I still am talking about it, obviously, and that was 2 years ago.
Listen, guys, if we're not going to get utopia, we're going to give up completely. If we're not getting utopia, I want to kill the United States of America.
And I think, in the instance of the vote with AOC, that was actually a secret vote by the nominating committee.
I don't care if Tucker Carlson wants me. I think corporations do bad things. If Tucker Carlson said, come on my show and talk about how corporations do bad things, I'm not going to go and contribute to the literal Nazi, the guy making fun of and supporting anti-black measures, anti-progressive measures, anti-liberal measures. And by liberal, I mean liberal democracy. I'm not going to go on this literal Nazi who had writers who were literal Nazis. I'm not going to go on his show and legitimize him because we both think corporations are bad. That's so bad. Like, oh my, it hurts us so much to legitimize him as a real populist. Yeah, but then, we don't have to agree on the race issues. You know, we could come together to be anti-government. Tucker Carlson, a Nazi. Have you watched him speak? Have you heard the reports on his riders being literally tied to Nazi groups on that one? What's that site called? I forget. He talks about globalism and the Jewish question. He talks about George Soros on his show, unironically. The globalists are coming to take over. They, the big bankers and big tech, they are coming to take over your towns. BLM is going to burn down the country. They. They. What does they mean? You'd have to see an example. Well, I'm not doing that right now.
The slating committee. So it's 50 members of Congress, and she got wiped out. I mean, it was 40.
It's just that the discourse is so much, and I don't mean you in particular, but generally the discourse is like Pelosi will punish X person for this. Pelosi will punish, and it's like, if we're talking part of the power, all of the power that the squad has is that they're enormously popular, not just with the left, but with all of like kind of the yes queen liberals who like a beautiful, stylish brown woman on the cover of their magazine, whether it's Ilhan or AOC or whomever. So there should be. Sometimes I wish in this moment, I think the thing that hurt me the most is that I wish the squad members recognize that their political capital lay with us, not with them, and lay with the broader public, even beyond the left, and that's a real kind of power. That like I dare Nancy Pelosi to come outwardly at AOC. Right now, if she stays in the inside game, the inside game, then Pelosi's always going to win. But if she comes out into the public, that's where AOC has real power, and she's been so reluctant to do that.
If you look at the reporting on that committee, on the slating committee vote, all the reporting has a line somewhere in one of the reports on it that was this vote public?
He's literally fear-mongering about right now. He's literally saying on his show that anti-fascism is what leads us to fascism. And we need a strong Western civilization to make sure we don't fall into the pit of socialism and Marxism and communism. If you don't get any of this, and you don't know why this is fascism or Nazism, you might want to look back at history and see the rhetoric and see what these people actually stood for and what they spoke of, and how they acted rhetorically and also in government. Faking, disguising themselves in left-wing politics. Hitler and Mussolini's platforms looked like Bernie Sanders.
The outcome would probably have been very different. They wouldn't have voted for Rice. They would have probably voted for AOC because they would have been afraid of that. But, the problem is that the vast majority of Americans do not pay attention to everything that we're talking about. And they're not going to get invested in this type of procedural stuff. And
people pay attention to an AOC went to Hunts Point yesterday during an inauguration and managed to steal press.
Oh my God, dude. Locally on Twitter, maybe. We're talking about national politics. We're talking about all 50 states.
From the inauguration, and her interview with Chris Cuomo about it was like the #1 clicked news clip on Twitter today.
If
AOC decides
on Twitter today, yep, Twitter is America.
Attention, it gets attention, which is part of what the core of what this force the vote thing is all about.
But like you said earlier, the assessment that she's making is it going to allow me to draw attention to maybe these labor struggles? Is it going to allow me to draw attention to raising funds, going on and playing Among Us and raising $500,000 for the people in her district? Is it going to allow me to do X, Y, and Z these things if I have a showdown to the death with Nancy Pelosi over
over anything? Name your thing, Sam. It could be anything.
Okay.
Let's be creative for a second. Forget the Medicare for all.
Let me ask you this. Let me put it this way. I don't know, but I speculate that if AOC thought that if she was to deny Nancy Pelosi the vote, that Medicare for all would necessarily happen, I suspect she would do that. I think the issue is like, am I going to risk this for something that is got, whether I think there's a 10% chance of this happening or 90% chance of that happening will determine how I assess the cost benefit analysis of that.
Yeah, I hear you, Sam. But
Tim Pool platformed Vosh, if anything. Tim Pool's like 10 times the size of Vosh.
I'm asking you a to play a mind game, because I hear you saying that you don't think a floor vote is worth it, and I do, but we're going to agree to disagree. I'm asking you, in the entire panel.
Dang it, Nico House has surpassed us by 300 viewers. What a shame.
Of things that exist in the world, things that are needed, things asked that we have to make. Bernie Sanders is obviously pushing this.
Hey, we're catching up to Xander Hall, though. We're catching up to Xander. Nico House has beat us. Oh, no.
Executive.
He has one.
I
I give up.
Emergency Medicare for all plan for the COVID, which, you know, a lot of these are tough sells because of Biden and Democrats, right? These are not Republicans. It's not tough sells because Republicans.
Thank you, everybody, by the way, for subscribing and liking this stream. I think we're at like 150 likes.
Student debt cancellation. Biden can do it like this. They're all pretending like they got their thumbs up their butt, like they can't do it. Like, we all know. So, thought experiment. It's January. No, let's say it's end of November when this all started percolating, and you have the ability to frame this in any way you want. Would you say yes? Force. You know, we should force of. We should. You know, I don't know.
I use Twitter for all my breaking news.
In exchange for what would you demand? And do you think that would make a difference in terms of like how much you got behind this? Because this situation is going to rise again. The margins in the House are so slim that it's not going to involve Nancy Pelosi. It's not going to have the same force of threat for that reason. But there are going to be a lot of opportunities for the left to say, we're not going to go along and get along unless you give me something. It won't get as much publicity. It won't be as big an impact because, again, my personal view is that Nancy Pelosi and her enormous unpopularity was really the hook that got you a lot of the scintillating coverage, including on the right-wing media, right? Right-wingers hate Pelosi. If Fox News is talking about Pelosi, then MSNBC feels compelled to defend Pelosi. Pelosi's on the TV giving interviews. Pelosi is terrible in interviews. You also saw that horrible clip that came out of the Hillary Clinton campaign. And the whole thing just becomes a rat race that inures the benefit of the left and Medicare for all. But you're designing this from scratch. You have an opportunity to admit, what would you ask for? Do you think that there are things that would have been worth using the political capital?
Like what would have been worth what would have been a good ask? I mean, honestly, like I think committee positions are hugely important. And I don't know. I honestly don't. I mean, I'm not being clear. I don't know how much, you know, when that vote comes 43-13 or whatever on the energy and commerce, or you know, at the very least, like Katie Porter getting that waiver. Other people have gotten waivers. They should have gotten that waiver. She got squeezed a little bit. Maybe I would get rid of seniority on committees. As an organizing principle, because that acts against the interests of progressives. Because
we don't get Bernie, right? then we lose out on our Bernie.
Well, I mean, it's in the House, right? But
is the seniority system still in the House? Because I thought they abolished that.
I'm pretty sure it is. I would get rid of it in the Senate too, to be honest with you. I would have liked to see Durbin not get judiciary. But you're right. Bernie might have had a problem in that situation. But I think anything that can get newer members more power, I think is good. Because I feel like Nancy Pelosi has been leader of the Democrats for almost 20 years, and there's been like maybe a half a dozen, at least, Republican leaders in the House. And I think that is, it's shocking.
Yeah, it really is.
I think I would look for things that are structural, that will, because I am of the mind that the left does not have much power right now, and I would look for things that would enhance that power. And maybe it would be like we want a specific person in the DCCC, so that the resources are deployed differently in terms of who gets reelected. Off the top of my head, I can just to answer it off the top of my head in a general sense, I would look for more structural things, because I want to build that power over time. Because, like I say, it just gets back to use my phone to nail in a nail. Like I could probably get that nail into this wood desk with my phone, but then the phone is done, and all I've done is that one nail. And
but I asked you, Sam, what you thought that what are the concrete losses that the squad would accrue if they were to withhold a vote for Nancy Pelosi? And so if you're saying that what you really would ask them to hold it out for is committee chairs, committee seats, and they went ahead and withheld the vote in order to get committee seats, well then by definition they couldn't even take away committee seats from them, right? Because they would have gotten them as part of their campaign. So what is it that we're so afraid of them losing? Because for me, it's not that I was so sure of the benefit, but there was just no downside to the thing. They already talk shit about Medicare for all. There's already billions of dollars of advertising against Medicare for all. The media is already against it. It can't get any worse than this. So what is the downside to trying?
But it's been getting better. And this is really just encapsulating of the whole thing. She's frustrated because it isn't happening faster. She's literally just mad progress isn't happening at her pace. She literally just explained it right there. Like, Medicare for all isn't shooting up to 90% approval in one day. It's not being passed right now. There's other things to deal with, and she's mad about it. That's literally her entire issue here. Basically, like, oh wait, it's not done yet. Why isn't it done yet? I'm mad, but
Vince,
it is her pace. She's frustrated. She's not happy with how fast it's going, how slow it might be to get actual progress.
Frankly, that
like the current strategy to say it's not working means you're just not paying attention. It is working. It just isn't happening overnight. Like we have freshman congresswomen. No matter what kind of political change it is, it takes a long time to do it. And even looking at the Reagan Revolution, that didn't happen in a day. That was boiling for a long time, and we had a lot of foreign policy shit that happened after Jimmy Carter that allowed it to take place. And then we have global neoliberalism, of course, taking over. But like even that took a long time to actually be established. That's probably one of the quickest changes. I mean, big events can spur changes. Like for example, like 9/11, you get the Patriot Act. Like the Capitol, you get they're trying to expand the surveillance state, but those things are different. When we talk about, and I've complained about this before, how Americans don't seem to understand how many people are actually dying right now. You know, so many people are dying from COVID, but you can kill 4 million people with COVID, no one will care. But you kill one person with a bomb, everybody cares. Isn't that quote like one death is a tragedy, but 1 million deaths is a statistic? COVID doesn't really draw on people's emotion that much. It doesn't draw on their emotions. It doesn't seem like an urgent thing that needs to be fixed right now. It's a slow, grueling battle. So the changes we're seeing are more so strained from like the debt from the government with like the CARES Act and stuff like that. The American public really is just kind of dealing with it. They aren't like pushing for any major change off of this result. If a bomb came in and killed 4 million people, that'd be so much different because it incites emotion. But what's happening right now is it's an anomaly. It really is. And a lot of Americans are happy with their current healthcare. If Americans weren't covered already, Medicare for all would be easier to get passed. But so many Americans are covered. Like, if you are a person who has decent private insurance, why would you give that up completely for a government-run plan where your money has to pay for the poorest people in the country? You have to think about it from their angle. But yeah, it really does suck. I fall under that sometimes. You know, COVID is hard to keep your alert up about because it's, you know, years and years and years of constant, you know, you're cycling with a mask on. You're cycling through the motions, grocery shopping with a mask on, working with a mask on. Hopefully you don't get sick. You hear about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people dying from your community. Some people you know, but there's no big boom, so nobody cares. It's such a weird place to be in. It's like you're stuck in like a dark limbo, like some type of like dark ether or something. But the issue with Medicare for all is it takes away private insurance, so people don't like that. They get scared. If it was like, if they expanded Medicaid to everybody or Medicare to everybody, that'd be a little bit different. Like if you don't have health insurance, you can buy into the Medicare option. That might help. I mean, there's so many different things. You have to sell to people who already have insurance that Medicare for all will help them in some way. Or you have to play to altruism. You know, it'll help other people, so it's worth it. But mostly people operate off of what's going to help them individually. And that's a big battle we're dealing with. That's why all social measures are hard to pass. You know, all you hear about debt cancellation for student debt is, oh, I already paid off my debt, or I never went to college. Why would I pay for student debt? Or like Medicaid. Oh, I don't use Medicaid. I make money. Why would I pay for Medicaid? Or like food stamps. Oh, I don't need food stamps. I'm not poor. I don't need to eat off that. I have a job. Why would I pay for food stamps for other people? It's the same discussion with every social program. Of course, it works in the end, but you know, of course, every social program is going to be heavily propagandized because it takes away from corporate profits. So it's just a long, hard fight.
Freshman or sophomore Congress people or six or whatever, preventing Pelosi from getting this. I know you're convinced that people that somehow, despite the media imbalance and despite the conventional wisdom,
don't talk about the upsides because I don't know about the upsides.
No,
My
no,
question right now is where are the downsides?
I'm saying the downsides. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that in that standoff, I'm not convinced that they wouldn't pay a massive price in terms of their popularity. I think that there may be a lot of people who turn against them who are somewhat supportive, and to the extent that they have, I mean, I understand the calculus that they have power, you know, presumably, you know, holding over Pelosi, but I'm not convinced that Pelosi.
And by the way, even if the virus somehow mutated to like, you know, some type of crazy strand that killed half the country, the result still wouldn't be Medicare for all. Like, people wouldn't be caring about Medicare for all. They'd be talking about the virus and about the economy and about like social distancing and stuff like that. It wouldn't be about health insurance. It'd be about health care. Yeah. But the discussion wouldn't be about, even if 99% of our population got wiped out, Medicare for all wouldn't even be talked about. That doesn't, you know, this situation isn't what is going to improve Medicare for all. The standing of it. Post-COVID, I think will be the perfect time to push for Medicare for all, as everybody's dealing with like medical debt and everything after COVID. But during COVID, attention isn't paid to stuff like Medicare for all policy. There's never a big policy that, like Social Security, for example, it didn't just like pass overnight. It was a big sweeping measure to heal a systemic issue that took a long time to get pushed for. And maybe after COVID will be the time Medicare for All spikes up in popularity. But right now, no. Private insurance popularity's up. Public option popularity's up. Medicare for All popularity's up. All forms of healthcare, their popularity's up. Is up. The popularity is up for all of it.
Have just called their bluff. You say, okay, you can be responsible for freezing the Democratic House. Good luck.
Just like the Republicans have no problem.
But they have a different constituency, don't they? The Republicans have Republican constituency.
I think that we have a constituency that wants that kind of fight and to be activated as well, but the Democratic Party doesn't court them. We talk constantly on the left about
that's not real, dude. There's not some imaginary group of people who are revolutionary fighters in the Democratic Party, but they vote for Nancy Pelosi over AOC. Those people don't exist. If you're a revolutionary, progressive, radical fighter, you're for Bernie Sanders or AOC. Maybe you're for Warren, at the most liberal. You're not for Pelosi already. There's not a base waiting to be awoken in the Democratic Party. Like these people, neoliberalism is a big ideology, bigger than we think. Yeah, Virgil's just getting drunk.
About there being 40 million people who don't vote, and all of these working class people who don't vote, and all of these working people, longtime labor
people who don't vote for a reason. It's literally the hardest thing in American history to get non-voters out. That's not a viable political strategy. I am for trying to drive up turnout. I am for doing that. By the way, I've always been for that. But right now, that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the current Democratic Party. There's not going to be a magical 50 million people waking up like, oh, time to vote progressive. A lot of these non-voters are very conservative, by the way. The biggest non-voting base in America is a really big conservative constituency that doesn't vote. That's why Trump was able to win. He woke up that base. The other side of that equation isn't that existent. And yeah, she's for voting third party. You have to, if you want concessions from Democrats based on votes, you need to prove your voters are gonna be, one, turning out, and two, turning out to vote for them. Like, these people advocating for third parties can't prove that their bases serve any political purpose, serve any political worth. So, if the Green Party, has 300 people turning out for them, or 300,000 this election, which is minuscule for the actual number of votes, they have no political capital there. They can barely turn out their own base, and they're not telling people to vote Democrat. They tell them to actively hate Democrats. That's not a viable political strategy. If you're really trying to get consent, we could talk about third parties then. I think somebody was mad at me on Twitter about it.
Families that used to be Democrats for generations, and now they went ahead and voted for Trump, the Obama to Trump voter. We talk and talk and talk about these people. And never once does it seem to occur to us that maybe if we acted with a little more tenacity, maybe if we acted like we were fighting for people in the way that people thought Donald Trump was, the way he presented himself as being, that we could actually grow our ranks, that we could have.
Yeah, and they also believe in class reductionism. Brianna Joy Gray often does. She thinks Trump won purely off economic issues, even after 4 years of terrible economic conditions. Although, Trump's base, by the way, poor white people, more poor white people voted for Hillary, by the way. I don't know if anybody knows that. The white people that made Trump win, that made white people, the demographics of white people that went to Trump were middle class and wealthy white people from the suburbs. Poor white people went to Hillary. It's a weird fact people don't know. Yeah, I could bring up the numbers actually. Let me try to find it real quick. Let's see. There's no way to get back to a multi-party environment. They've been trying for like 50 years. It hasn't worked. I don't know why we'd keep on trying a strategy that doesn't work when we found one that does work. We found this strategy that does win. We've been trying third parties for a long time. Our institutions are set in a way that don't allow them. Maybe if you're in like Alaska or Maine, you could be a third party and get like a local town hall seat somewhere. But I think the change we need needs to happen pretty quick. We don't have 35 years to wait for third parties to roll around. Let me see. Okay. The poor white working class was, if anything, more likely than the rich to vote for Clinton. It wasn't the economy. It wasn't the economy, but racism and xenophobia that explains Trump's rise. Let me find the actual numbers. It's about racism and xenophobia, dude. It wasn't about class issues. Trump might have won based off swing voters on class issues in some regard in these specific Rust Belt states, but it was mostly the race stuff. 100%. I can't find the actual numbers. More than half of white working class Americans believe discrimination against whites has become a big problem. As big of a problem. Oh my God, dude, that's terrible. Working class whites think discrimination against whites is as big of a problem as discrimination against blacks and other minorities. We got to get into this deeper then. Yeah, we got to get into this. This is a big trend that we need to focus on. White working class people White working class people think they're in excellent, good, or fair shape. Only 25% of working class people who are white think they're in poor shape. This is another big... Okay, I need to save this. This is a big thing we talk about. White working class Americans are just as likely to say their financial situation has improved and diminished. Okay, well, here's our big numbers. Yeah, it's culture. 2/3 of white working class Americans believe American culture. It's all, oh my God, dude. Thank God I found this. I'm really happy. Thank you for asking that question. This is the resource I needed. Cultural displacement. Number 5 is economic hardship when it comes down to the data on why people voted for Trump. Religious affiliation, political profile. Six in 10 white working class Americans say their family is working class or lower class. 4 in 10 white working class Americans reported they grew up in middle class. 29%. Wait, 11% of white working class Americans believe they grew up in upper class households? What? Kylie Unity, what's up, everybody? All right, so yeah, there you go. I'm saving this resource. Yep. All right.
More persuasive power.
Everybody, thank you for subscribing.
Doing the same thing we've been doing for the last 30 years of neoliberalism. Ain't it?
I agree, but I just don't think that holding up a vote for a vote that's going to lose in the House.
No, Sam, stop. In this scenario, I'm asking you to design your perfect ask. It can be anything you want. Ask for anything.
That would be worth
the
thing. I mean, I can tell you what I think would be the good ask, but what I cannot tell you is exactly how I would assess if I was one of those members of Congress, what the chances that Nancy Pelosi, I mean, I don't know, but it's not inconceivable to me that there was an attempt to leverage more, and Nancy Pelosi goes, go fuck yourself.
Right, but it's not leverage.
You want to be out there? Good luck with what's going on out there.
But you're not doing it. And until you publicly withhold the vote. Like the point of this, the force of the vote is not some backroom deal that they always are doing and always negotiating. The whole persuasive value of force of vote is that they publicly humiliate Nancy Pelosi by not voting for her.
Your perception is that they're going to humiliate Nancy Pelosi and not themselves.
Yes, they're going to. No, regardless of what happens to the squad, Nancy Pelosi is humiliated if it's a public knowledge that she wasn't able to secure a vote for speaker after how many ever years that she's been in the seat.
No, wait, this is such a bad point.
Upstart squad members declined to vote for her.
You don't think it's
a huge story.
You think it's going to be impossible for the Democratic?
The little baby squad members would be crushed by experienced Democratic voters, dude. What does she think is going to happen?
Democrats from figures like Cory Bush and AOC or
hang on about that. I don't think the Democratic establishment can afford, if properly organized, can afford to alienate its own base anymore.
Who cares about Pelosi? Even if that was true, who cares about Pelosi looking like a loser? Who cares? I thought we're talking about getting Medicare for all passed. Who cares about Pelosi looking like a loser? She's gonna be gone in 2 years. Maybe if Pelosi was like 50 years old, you try this, but she's not running again.
An establishment can't afford to alienate.
I don't think they should do that, but I mean,
they can't go from celebrating, oh, look at our diversity and oh, look at the first openly gay elected, blah blah blah. They can't go from all of that to the next day. Remember that
they do that.
Of all of this.
They do that.
We won
anyway.
Georgia. Look at Mondaire Jones and look at Ossoff and Warnock. They can't turn from that and suddenly be like, yes. The two
That's all
Muslim
they
squad
do.
members,
they do it and it
black
works.
And brown people, women, hashtag believe us. The whole the Democrats have set themselves up because they've built this edifice of identity politics and how wonderful all these young new upstarts are because
True.
they're good for the Democratic
exactly.
Party brand.
That's why you need to wait until they build the necessary political capital to actually do something. AOC shouldn't get herself to be unpopular with regular Democratic voters by holding up a vote for Nancy Pelosi because of these exact reasons. She's frustrated. She's really mad. Things aren't happening quicker. Like I said before, she's mad. Things are not happening in a really fast way. But the power is happening. The power is building. We need to keep on staying on the program, what has been working, and building political power for when it's time to make our big leap. But now isn't the time. There's no indication based in reality that says now is the time. If you say now is the time, you can justify any time being like, 60,000 people dying per year from a lack of health insurance. Okay, yes, that happens every year. That doesn't mean this is the most expedient time to push a vote for something or whatever. That's the danger of operating only off of principle.
They cannot execute a pivot that fast to try to tell us that at the same time they're all horrible. At the
Yo, Sean, hop in Discord, buddy. Hop in Discord. Show me how much of a clown I am.
same time they're doing it in defense of someone as reviled as
They
Nancy
wouldn't be
Pelosi.
just saying
I'm
it.
a neoliberal
They
fraud.
would be saying they are holding up the seating of Nancy Pelosi, of a Democrat, as
Yes.
Speaker of the House, and for what?
People are
Here's the thing, I'm glad
dying.
you asked that, because here's a part of it I think was missing. I really wish we could have been having these kinds of conversations before Force the Vote. I'm not saying that to you, but I wish that this had been where we landed, because these are strategic concerns that I think are so important. I think it was important for the squad to come, or whoever progressives got involved in this, to pick a substitute for Nancy Pelosi that made Democrats look bad if they were.
Oh, okay. I'll do that actually, DJ. You just reminded me. I'll make links to Discord and everything, so you could do the exclamation point Discord and all that stuff. I'm gonna do this. I'll make this then. That'll be real, or whatever.
Rejected them. Now, I know Barbara Lee said that she didn't want to do it, but I don't really care. Optically, I think the Force the Vote campaign should have done this too. In retrospect, just say it's Barbara Lee, because look at the context that we're in. First of all, Barbara Lee's a black woman. She's a progressive. She's very well esteemed. She has seniority. Additionally, we just came off at the same time as Force the Vote was percolating this leaked tape of Joe Biden being openly hostile and disrespectful to every single member of every.
Okay, nobody even knows about this tape. This is by far, by the way, her best argument. The one she's about to make is going to be her best argument this entire 3-hour thing. 100% this is going to be her best argument, guaranteeing it.
Leader of a black whatever you call it, civil rights group in the country, right? Just openly contemptuous of them. So there's a world where you could have gotten a lot of black punditry and maybe even some black political figures also behind you on this, and done some solidaristic outreach to the Black Lives Matter community and other criminal justice advocate groups to say, this is retribution. You have to give us this. The Democratic Party has disrespected and looked down on black people for so long, including in this moment. We need a new Speaker of the House.
This is
Nancy
on
Pelosi
fast.
plans to retire soon anyway. Why can't we have a leader like Barbara Lee?
What if Barbara
now
Lee
they
comes out and says, I don't want it?
But then they have to make an argument for why it shouldn't be someone who is more diverse and more progressive, instead of playing this game that they always play with Nancy Pelosi, which is because she's a woman.
I think Brianna Joy Gray is really underestimating again how progressive Democrats are. Like a lot of white liberals who vote Democrat are still really, they don't care that much about race issues, as they say. They'll drop it in a second. It's like a toy they'll put down when they're done with it. And also these black Democratic leaders like Hakeem Jeffries or what's his name, Jim Clyburn. All these people are they don't support progressive policies already. But yeah,
Well,
I want to hear
anybody
Sam's
against her is an
response.
attack.
What if Barbara Lee came out and said, I don't want it?
She might.
Well, there's your argument as to why it shouldn't be Barbara Lee.
Right, but
I mean,
Barbara Lee then has
that was the
to
problem we had in 2018, right? I mean,
imagine this.
she dropped out of the race essentially, and there was nobody to vote for.
Did she say that?
First of all, it could
Did
be one of
Barbara
the
Lee
members of the
drop
squad
out?
if they were really committed to this plan, and it should be. But
It can't be a member to the squad. There's no way a freshman congresswoman in any sense is going to be. Never mind.
whomever. I mean, they're all black and brown too. But
It would
I
be a
would-
tough
I would
sell
see
that they
an
should be
interview.
Speaker of the House in their first year of.
who cares?
I mean,
The point is, let's have a public conversation about whether or not we should just follow blindly
cares?
norms, or whether we should live in a world where people who actually represent the interest and the policy goals of a majority of Americans should be in a leadership position, as opposed to just the
for
oldest person
us,
there.
but I mean, listen, Brie, I think that there is. I think it's an interesting conversation. We're talking about a general theory about this.
Isn't that
I
our
think-
job, Sam? What else do we have to do?
I do. I think this is very valuable. This exchange, and I guess I think like there are institutional things. It's sort of the Machiavelli's. If you come for the king, or in this case the queen, make sure you take her out. And because and the strategy of trying to, or else.
What happens? Because I've asked you this several times now. What happens to them
I mean,
if
look,
they lose? What is the
I haven't worked in Congress, so I don't have enough of awareness institutionally. But it's about resources that you can have access to in terms of money, in terms of staff. It could be committee positions. It could be you get an opportunity to introduce some amendments that, or you could get maybe some appropriations to go to your
Hey,
district.
Sean, if you don't hop in Discord within 2 messages, you're getting banned.
Because maybe you need to build a community center. I mean, there's a whole there's a lot of books that outline the sort of transactional nature of these things that are obscured from us.
A couple of them on the shelf
Of
behind me.
course. So you recognize that there could be for Congress people who want to get reelected, who want to be able to deliver material benefits for their constituents, or maybe some of them, are like they want to be the person who gets out in front of the cameras. Whatever it is, there's no doubt that leadership has. We don't know.
We don't know what the consequences are.
Part of it, everyone is so willing to say we can't do this because the consequences are so high. And I'm sorry, you cannot make that argument if you can't even you can't even put together a little bit of a cogent argument about
it depends.
I want to say this. What's important is I said as part of the ask. That's why I started with the ask. You can ask to ward off against any of those possibilities down the line. If you think you're going to lose committee appointments, make committee appointments part of your ask. If you think you're going to lose out funding to your district, stipulate that you're only going to get this vote if you get commensurate funding with what you got last year or whatever you asked for. The sky is the limit, and if you don't get it, then you just say, I'm going to dethrone Nancy Pelosi and put someone in her place with less power. Because let's talk about why Nancy Pelosi has the power she has. It's not just because she's been there a long time. It's because other people owe her favors because she is the most powerful fundraiser.
She brings in money to the party, which is another reason why it's dangerous to do this, because progressives don't have that. They don't have that power, and other politicians care about that power. If you are a progressive, you need to come to the table with other politicians saying, I have something you want. So if Pelosi brings money and Democratic support with her, what can progressives bring to the table that will outweigh what Pelosi can bring? What do they have? They have lower support in the party. They have no big money. They have no media connections. They have no Washington connections. They're freshman congresswomen and men. So what are they? What do they bring to the table? Do they have anything? Yeah, no.
In Congress. So
well,
whoever
it's not just that.
Whoever she gets replaced with is not going to be as powerful.
The HEROES Act.
It's not going to be able to do as much harm also.
The HEROES Act, for instance. One of the big criticisms of the HEROES Act, where she had the opportunity to negotiate and maybe get a skinnier package over the course of the summer, maybe that $1.8 trillion thing, right? Part of it, I think they were afraid that if they passed that $1.8 trillion deal with the Trump administration, that Trump might win the presidency. It's not inconceivable, actually. I mean, he didn't lose by very much. But another reason why, and I think if you go back and look at the way that she defended the HEROES Act, it was a wish list for her committee chairs, and her committee chairs all have their constituents as well. And I'm talking within Congress, right? And so she is delivering by putting these things in there. Her committee chairs can go back to their voters and say, I fought for, the easement on the river that everybody's talking about in my district. And that was in there. And that's why all these things were sort of larded up with stuff that was basically a laundry list of stuff.
Yeah,
and
that too. They only have 5 people in Congress.
Dole those things out, which are, essentially, currency to the members of their committees, and they can bring those home to their districts and say, I fought for this, or I got this.
And not only that, you'd be asking these other people for a favor to not vote for Pelosi. You'd be tanking yourself politically.
So there are machinations, I think, within Congress that, yes, I can't sit here and tell you definitively what the price would be for these individuals. And I think to a certain extent, you don't know, right? You don't know down the road what you're going to need in terms of favors from different people. And the question is just simply you weigh it in terms of what the cost benefit analysis is. And I think, I am inclined to give leeway to people who I think are closest to my political disposition in Congress, more leeway to them than I would others.
Why should Pelosi ever do anything the squad wants? Why should she ever listen to the squad?
Right now? Yeah. I mean,
why?
I don't know that they have the power to make her do what they want. There may be things that she needs from them at times. Like, will you go out and campaign for this in these areas amongst these people? Yes, I will. Will you give me this?
Thank you for the $5 again. I stopped listening. I'm too focused on I understand. Be focused on the kitty. It's okay.
Okay. I mean, I would imagine there's some type of transactional stuff that happens along those lines as well. And you can sour relationships so that's not possible. You can maintain relationships so there's an opportunity there. I mean, this is.
When you say relationships, I just want to be clear because you and I both understand that things don't happen in Congress because people are nice or said something nice publicly about them.
I'm not saying nice.
I know. I said you and I both understand this. We're in agreement. I'm not patronizing. I know you know this very, very
well. But them not voting for Pelosi is also an attack on everybody that does vote for Pelosi. You're starting a civil war within the party. You're not just alone. I mean, you hold up her position. You're making them go to a second, third, fourth round. In the middle of all this Donald Trump denying the election stuff and all that?
Well, at the end of this line, can we go to questions?
Sure. That it's not about whether or not
you don't get a vote.
Whether someone's nice or not. It's about power. And so a lot of people in the course of this have been saying to me, Brianna, you're a dumb moron who doesn't understand what power is. I just like to take this moment to say there have been a lot of really ugly, hateful, personal things said about me that have offended me much more than anything Jimmy Dore has said, some of which by people who are in your employ, some of which are people, and I don't hold you responsible for them because I think that's silly, but I would like to say that I don't want to make this argument about that, and I think that we can all have the self-control to not be petty and personal, but I have been told that I just don't understand how power works. And I think it's quite the opposite. I know that power doesn't work by saying nice things about Nancy Pelosi in public, but at the end of the day, she doesn't owe you anything.
Oh my freaking god, dude. You can't say you understand how power works and then ignore why they say nice things about Nancy Pelosi in public. Why would you say nice things with the most popular politician in America? You know, you could use that argument for that. Like Barack Obama, you don't personally like Barack Obama. Why did Bernie Sanders run ads with him and Barack Obama? Remember that in Florida when Bernie Sanders ran ads when with him and Obama walking? Because you want to tie yourself to political figures who the other Democratic Party people like. You have to build people power through that way. You don't want to throw away that people power. Your power is in people, not institutions. You can't, on one hand, say progressivism needs to happen on the outside, and then on the other hand, demand the squad does something that is all inside politics. It just doesn't work like that. You can't demand both of those things don't work together.
In private, the squad will go and campaign for whoever.
No, I'm not saying Pelosi is right now, but she's seven. No, it was an example. It was an example. Like, why would you say? Because she said, why would you say something nice about a politician? And I said, for example, what if they're the most popular politician in America? For example, what if there is a most popular politician in America? You should say something nice about them. If Pelosi is one of the most prominent leaders in the Democratic Party, you might want to say something nice about her because she's a leader in the Democratic Party. But like Obama is another example of somebody popular within the Democratic Party who you might want to tie yourself to because you'll get more Democratic voters. You might want to tie yourself to people popular within that party. Nationally, of course, Pelosi isn't popular. But in the Democratic Party, she most definitely is one of the most popular and well-known figures. 70% approval rating is pretty high for a speaker. Yeah. Even within the party. Especially with with how bad she is.
How Nancy Pelosi tells them to campaign.
This isn't sleazy. You can.
But
they have the big money in the Washington. We need people. We need to get more people on our side. Anything that sacrifices that isn't worth it. We don't have the same leeway as these establishment politicians do. It's a different playing field. They can do sleazy things. They have the stuff to back them up. They have extra political power that we can't have access to because of who we are.
Nancy Pelosi is powerful and the squad is weak. And that's always going to be the case because Nancy Pelosi has spent decades being a fundraising power horse, and the squad has.
And if you don't have the people power yet.
This instance, because of a procedural quirk and the narrow margin in the House, they had legitimate power. And I don't care what they did with it. I don't care if it was forced vote. I don't care if it was something else. Okay. But my primary concern is that they chose not to use it, despite the fact that there has been a very, I think, poor articulation of what they would lose in doing so.
Well, AOC has, in fact, actually not gone out and campaigned for people to Pelosi, and they've been on opposite sides of this in multiple situations over the course of the past cycle. I mean, do you think Nancy Pelosi was in favor of AOC, the squad promoting, getting rid of Elliot Engel?
I think they're doing a little dance around each other, but if push comes to shove, Nancy Pelosi can make anybody do what she wants them to do. And she's picking her battles and pulling her punches as well.
I think AOC has,
I don't care about the UK just because it's a parliamentary system. It's a little bit different. If you're voting on something in that system with a multi-party setup, and also you did it 20 times, it took a long time, right? But this isn't the. Oh wait, did my shit drop? Wait 1 second. It says I dropped from 200 viewers to 0 viewers at some point. Okay, but yeah, it's a different. Looking at the actual facts right now, you don't have to extrapolate it to something else because the facts right now are not set. We don't have the labor organizing either. That any country had 20, 50, 40, 50 years ago. What year did the NHS even get installed? Failed votes aren't bad in general. For example, in Canada, they wanted to push for a wealth tax. And that's something that, like, so much of the political system supports. That was so toxic to not support. If you don't support a wealth tax, that was so popular. It had such hard support. You hurt yourself politically. My issue with forced to vote and why I think it's a bad idea is because Medicare for All doesn't have the popularity they think it does. And Pelosi isn't as unpopular as people think she is. Inspector, thank you very much for the Tier 3 membership. Welcome to the Al-Gore-ithm.
in terms of like leading primaries and helping fund primaries and raise money for challengers is, I mean, look, the DCCC blacklisted any organization that was supposedly
I'm well
helping.
aware.
And so I mean, I'm not convinced of that premise, and I think that's where she's chose to expend her power. My experience in institutions, my experience has been slightly different than that. Now, it's not Congress, so maybe Congress operates under different rules than other institutions. But my experience is that you can, there are thresholds where you can alienate yourself. You can be a rival of someone, and you can alienate yourself so much that you're not able to even make negotiations that are in your mutual best interests. People are people, and sometimes emotions override what their rational assessments are of what they're going to get out of a certain situation. And politicians do that, too. I mean, I think they tend to be more calculating and sociopathic than your average person.
What does this say? There's a reason folks further left of the squad find the idea of incrementalism and reform a joke. They don't last without a revolution pushing them. Thank you, Inspector. Further left. Jimmy Dore isn't further left. Brianna Joy Gray isn't further left. They're just more radical. They're more revolutionary, yeah. It's a different category of left, not further left. But, like, I don't know. Did the NHS pass with a revolution? Yeah, unions were so big. There's so many people who thought they're Democrats, who think they're Democrats from where I am in Pennsylvania because they were big union people. But the unions left, so they left Democrats completely.
But I think they do have some measure of like, man, I just hate that, MFer so much that in this instance, not going to do it.
I want to say that I have seen a lifetime of truly discussing despicable things said to my co-host, Brianna Gray. Like really ugly, insulting, and frankly false things said to her. I think nobody here can match. Nobody else here can match.
I'm not more left
of invective rancor that she receives.
Oh, thanks, Virgil.
And how are you ranking far left? Is it like private ownership or like your tactics? Tactics don't mean you're more far left or less far left.
I'm not. I mean, in particular, women of color in this sort of like environment online.
No, it's discussed me. And but I will also say that at a lesser level, I've seen a lot of rancor directed to Sam Seder. I've seen a lot of cruel and false things directed towards him. And frankly, a lot of those are true, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. And I've also seen a lot of frankly unacceptable
new access reformers versus revolutionary
and about what I do or do not put into my lungs, and it's unacceptable. And frankly, this is why I need the power to ban people.
And even some revolutionaries, isn't that like, wouldn't they be more for, like, you can be a revolutionary and be more for incrementalism in a sense, right? You don't have to be pushing for, I mean, there is the concept of permanent revolution that you might be for, but
the comments that are unacceptable. And like something has to happen there. Friends, we've been going for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I was hoping that we could take a few questions before we wrap. If that's good with you all. Maybe some people want to apologize for some of the rude statements they have made about me or my moderation ability.
Yeah. All right. Everybody have a good rest of your weekend. Maybe call in, stream tomorrow night, possibly. I don't know what time. Probably 9 o'clock if I do it. Maybe if anybody has Call of Duty Cold War Zombies, I want to play a game of zombies with people. So please tell me on Discord. If you have that.